Welcome back to the Brewer Fanatic podcast. We are back with the fifth and final episode of our off-season minor league specials. We'll be focused on the Nashville Sounds in this episode, and frankly, that means there won't be a ton to talk about because we're only focusing on players returning to the system this year, and there's quite a bit of overturn at the AAA level every year, but maybe even more so this year. But we are also going to make this the episode where we answer any overview questions, anything kind of involving the whole minor leagues, or maybe some draft questions that we got over the course of doing this. So we'll get to all of that in a little bit. But before we do, Joseph, how are you doing tonight?
Hanging in. I got a cold, which has been not fun. The whole family's sick. But yeah, excited to wrap up the 2025 season, as the upcoming season is, like right around the corner. So,
yeah, we're recording this a week out from pitchers and catchers reporting, basically. So, yeah, we are really getting into it at this point. So, obviously, very much looking forward to that. And spring training means we do start to get some minor league information and hear about some prospects and hear about some guys who maybe come back throwing a little harder or doing something different. So very much looking forward to the tidbits that we might get once spring training really gets going. But before we do get into all of the Sounds talk this episode, we do have quite a bit of news, more than we've had for most of that we need to cover before we get into it. So I think we start right away with probably the best news and the most important news of anything that we could possibly talk about today. And that came out midweek, maybe early in the week this week. And it was video of Frank Chiarone. He had reposted it on his own Instagram page. It was courtesy of the Baseball Performance Center where he trains. And it was just a video of him throwing a ball. And in all honesty, given everything else that has happened with him over the last month, I didn't really think that was something we would see for quite a while. And don't get me wrong, this is a plyo. He's throwing it against a plyo wall. It's a weighted ball, basically. It's only one throw. He's clearly going at very minimal effort. But given what the case was about a month ago, I didn't think we were going to see anything along these lines for a long time. So just really happy for him, first of all, that clearly there's at least steps to be taken towards getting back on a baseball mound, because we talked about when all of this went down, and if you haven't heard the earlier episodes and you haven't been following, he was in a horrific car crash, and there were some pretty dark moments in the days after it where no one was really sure what exactly was going to happen. Obviously, he's come out of it on the other side in a very good place right now, and is even able to start some baseball activities, which is awesome. But we mostly focused on just getting him back to health and hoping that he would be able to live a normal life. But at the same time, this is a guy who was on the precipice of starting his professional career. And that's something that you worked your whole life for. Like, you really want to be able to do it. You want to get yourself into eventually the big leagues, but into pro ball is the first step. And he's on the doorstep, started with his career. This happens. I'm sure there was a time, at least once he knew he was going to be okay in general, that you start to wonder, like, okay, am I going to be able to do baseball things again? Am I going to be able to pitch again? And at the very least, this looks like a very, very good step in the right direction. Hopefully something that means that I'm not going to set the timeline, but just guessing and based off of what we do know, and it'd be pretty surprising to me if we saw anything from him in an actual game or anything in the next season. But the fact that he's already throwing a ball, clearly you can't rule anything out with him. And at the very least, it looks like he's already starting to make strides towards returning to pro baseball at some point, which is fantastic news for him. And it never mattered really in terms of news for the Brewers as an organization, but it is good news for the Brewers now too. Because there is a lot of talent in that arm. And if he is healthy, he's definitely somebody who could move through the ranks. So really, really good news that we saw midweek. And, if we hear stuff throughout the throughout the next 7-8 months of the season and start to get updates on him. Of course, I'll talk about it during the minor league sandboxes and everything else is whenever we have information on him. But really, really good news, right, Joseph? Just hard to believe, honestly, to some extent, that it's already at that point where he's able to go out and throw a ball at all. But really, really good news.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's astounding. I mean, you remember the day it happened. You and I were texting back and forth, and I think this may be the first instance of a professional athlete coming back from the dead in the AI news era. You recall they had put out like these bogus AI written God, it was so grotesque. And I had thought for a period of time that the worst had happened, and it was an emotional wreck for an hour, just feeling for his family. And to see this, incredible. It's just so incredible. Not to mention to see that he's actually soft tossing this soon. I mean, he's an incredible talent. And so it certainly appears like he's going to be able to start rehabilitating. I don't think that was just for show. So that's just phenomenal news for the prospect nerds and for Frank and his family and friends. It's just pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just fantastic to see. So, like I said, if we hear more, as we hear more, we'll certainly be keeping you updated. Check the Brewer Fanatic forums. That's probably where you're going to get the first news. But yeah, it's just really, really good news. And it was a really nice, uplifting moment to have in the middle of a week that you weren't really expecting to have, at least for a long time, if you were going to see anything like that. So really great news there. Some other news we are going to touch on, though, the Brewers have signed quite a few minor league free agents, and a few of them Jack and I have discussed on the Major League podcast. But we'll start with the most recent, Jacob Hurtubise, who actually made the Reds opening day roster in 2025. Very, very fast outfielder. Shocking, I'm sure. It's a very small sample, so it's hard to say anything about the defense in terms of how it graded out analytically. I saw split grades from Fangraphs and Baseball America. At the very least, he's very fast and a decent defender with a pretty good arm, I believe, is what I was seeing. So that is something the Brewers are always going to enjoy. Now, there's a very big lack of power, which also tends to be something that lines up with the Brewers and some of these minor league deals. But that's kind of the theme of at least two of the three outfielders the Brewers are reported to have agreed on a minor league deal with. The other two being Jordan Adams and Desan Brown, Desan Brown I haven't seen listed on the official transactions, even though it was rumored almost a month ago now. So we were kind of waiting to see if it would actually get listed at any point to talk about him, and it hasn't yet. So that's a little interesting, but Baseball America had it out there. So that's a very trustworthy source. I feel pretty comfortable saying he has agreed to one, but it just hasn't been made official for some reason yet. But anyway, Hurtubise, Adams, Brown, all of them fast, all of them very good athletes. Brown especially is a very, very good defender. He's won a minor league Gold Glove, seen as a really, really strong defender. All of them have their holes on the offensive side of the ball, but we talked really almost every episode that we've done this year about the fact that we thought they were going to need some outfield depth in the upper minors. They actually, in AAA, just with how many 40-man outfielders they have at the moment, they probably won't need too many at that level, but they are going to need some in AA. They'll need a couple to be, in and out of the lineup in AAA. And these are some guys who are going to add to that. But just on those three, Joseph, anything you know about them or anything you've seen them play a few times, anything you want to add on those three?
Well, I think Desan Brown, when he signed, also the Blue Jays, Blue Jay Nation wrote an article too. So because Baseball America did, I mean, they're typically always right with that kind of stuff. But fascinatingly with him, we get him in an even year. Historically in the minors, he's been great in even years and like really not good in odd years. So maybe we catch lightning in a bottle there. But really, to me, these guys are essentially upper level org depth. And if something happened at the upper level, you know that they can cover the outfield grass. And so they will always prioritize defensive tools above bat in that kind of scenario. They kind of always do. Last year, we got Jared Oliva to fill that role, and he actually had more pop than I thought. And I honestly felt if Oliva would have stayed healthy, he may have been considered for a call-up because he was, just causing havoc on the bases and the outfield. He could cover so much ground. He's since left the org as a free agent. But yeah, I think these are just really just like, to your point, like uppers level org depth. I don't see any of them getting on the roster, especially when you have a Garrett Mitchell coming back. They've got a healthy group, but as we know, oft injured. So I'm sure one or two of the greater depth of these, quadruple A signings will probably get some innings at some point at the Brewers level. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think with Stuart Baroa, Brandon Lockridge, even Tyler Black playing some outfield, like there's a lot of people who are currently on the 40-man. Then you have Luis Lara, who's an actual major league prospect that they're obviously going to be looking at in the near future, I think. So these are guys to help fill innings, and then, like you said, be that extra depth. And if something does happen, sometimes a guy like Daz Cameron was kind of picked up with that in mind, and all of a sudden the power really, really showed up. He always had some pop in his bat, but he hit really well in AAA and got to the big leagues and did enough to help the Brewers while he was up there. So like these types of signings can always be kind of swept under the rug and not paid much attention to, but sometimes they end up being Andrew Monasterio, who's helped multiple big league seasons for the Brewers. And there's a lot of value that can be found here in with a lot of these guys. These are Hurtubise not included, but a lot of the players they've signed this offseason are former early round picks. Jordan Adams is another first round pick they've signed. That's now, I believe that's the third one that they've signed to a minor league deal that was a first round pick in the past. So they like to take those shots on guys who are clearly talented but maybe haven't put it all together, and sometimes that can work out really well, and sometimes it's just kind of shuffling through different players and giving them opportunities and it doesn't work. But I think there's a lot of value that can be found here. The other two signings, Jack and I probably covered a vast majority of my thoughts on it, but right-handed pitcher Jacob Wagasback and catcher Reese McGuire. So I think Reese McGuire is a pretty good bet to end up being the backup catcher coming out of spring training for the Brewers. Wagasback's pretty interesting. I don't know if you've seen him at all, Joseph, but on those two, any thoughts for those two?
No, I listened to your guys' discussion on them. It's, the first thing that happened for me is that, Jeferson Quero's shoulder and, just getting the data back from last year and just lamenting that ever happened, because, this was the prime time. Had that never happened, he would absolutely be a shoo-in to be at the major league clubhouse. So I think it's insurance for that. I don't know what the data read from the winter leagues or the WBC, but man, it was not pretty when you got the end of the year numbers on his pop and velocity to second base. I was like, so hopefully another off season with, working out the scar tissue or something of that nature. You just hope he gets back to it, because man, by the end of last season, we'll get into it here, he was hitting with the bat. Like, he got hot again and you started seeing that power. And so that was super encouraging and exciting. I was like, oh, right, that's the Jeferson Quero we used to see all the time. And so you just hope that the body fully comes back healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. The other two players we'll talk about quickly here or actually three, are two players who were in the org last year and then another who was in the org a couple years ago, who all are getting some good opportunities, I think. So Abdiel Mendoza, he ended up signing with the Mariners. He was a right-handed pitcher who spent, I believe, his full season in AA, maybe a slight time. He might have spent a bit of time in AAA, but mostly with the Shuckers last year. The interesting thing about him is that he finished in the top 10 in all of minor league baseball for two-seam stuff plus on Baseball America's list that they put out after the season. So there's a really interesting two-seam, which you could see if you watched. I mean, it's a good fastball. It played well. It could get some grounders. It had enough movement to even get some whiff on it, which isn't normally what you're looking for in a sinker / two-seam. I think we both agreed that we probably would have liked to have. We were hoping we would see him back in the organization this year if they could, but for his sake, Seattle's a really good organization to land with as well. I mean, they're up there with the Brewers as some of the best at developing pitching. So this is the type of place where you could kind of see it working out for him, just like it could have worked out in Milwaukee. But obviously, somebody you watched quite a bit this year as well, Joseph. Anything you'd like to add on him? Anything you saw, in the secondaries or anything that you think will maybe help play up with that fastball?
Well, he really found his niche. He played the whole season with the Shuckers, by the way, but he really found his niche as a reliever. And he struggled in the beginning. I think, any number of things can be happening, pressure on yourself, new organization, yada, yada. But there was a period of time there out of the bullpen for them where he was literally shut down. And he would do multi-inning efforts there. And so that's how I envisioned, if he came back, I was like, oh man, it was so cool if they were able to get him back, bring him to Nashville and try to work him out in that piggyback role or, multi-inning reliever. But to your point, Seattle, fantastic pitching organization. So it's a really good next step for him. And so hopefully he learns some things with the Brewers and he can build on those in Seattle. But yeah, I wasn't surprised at all that the two-seamer made that list. I remember seeing that at the end of the year and just like, oh, wow. Okay. And it's worth mentioning, he was the only Brewers pitcher in all of the minor leagues that made the Stuff Plus top 10s this year for the four-seamer and the two-seamer, if I'm not mistaken. So that was mildly surprising. So.
Yeah. I think they had said if Miz had been in the minors longer, he would have obviously made the one for the four-seam, but he wasn't on whatever their qualifications were. But yes, I believe you're correct. He was the only one with the fastball that made the list at all. The other two, one of them spent a little time in AAA, and we would have been covering him today if he had returned to the Brewers. But Justin Yeager, who was the third piece in the William Contreras History Ruiz trade a few years ago with Yoel Payamps and Contreras, obviously, did some really good things in AA. Struggled a bit more when he got to AAA, not necessarily results-wise, but just in the strikeout and the walks especially went sky high, while the strikeouts really kind of bottomed out from where they were in AA. So he shows good stuff. He's got good stuff. Both he and former Brewers prospect, outfielder Carlos Rodriguez, different from the pitcher, obviously, but they both received major league camp invites from the Padres. So they are both going to at least get a shot at, going into big league camp and showing what they can do. And Yeager's a guy that I think there's a pretty good chance at some point he gets a chance in the big leagues, and we'll see how he can do with that. But he has the type of stuff that you tend to at least get some situation where you end up on a big league roster with his type of stuff just because of injury, or you end up in an organization that's just always cycling through relievers or whatever it is. But he's got a major league arm, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. So I think at some point we'll see him in the big leagues. And Carlos Rodriguez, known for his hit tool more than almost anything else, but he showed some pretty good ability to throw and do some good things in the outfield as well when he was in the Brewers org and some speed. So both of them getting opportunities. Anything on them that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's, obviously Carlos was with the Braves last year. He was playing with Gwinnett in their outfield. Yeager's just a really good competitor overall. Like he's built, he's got the frame, he's got competitive nature. Like he is a bulldog out there. It's cliche, but really it's true. He's just intense and he's unafraid to throw the heater by anyone. But as you said, in AAA, he just had, he's going to have to figure out a little bit more to that next level up, but has the makeup, I would say, beyond just having this, like the stuff or an MLB caliber pitcher. Like he has absolute MLB bullpen makeup. The other one I would add to that, and just to remind listeners, if you care about former Brewers prospects like we all do, we have an ongoing thread in the minor league forum for the miscellaneous alumni notes. And I'd also point out something that was announced today at MLB Trade Rumors that I found fascinating, which is really cool, is that David Dahl took an outfield and assistant hitting coach position with the Dodgers AAA affiliate. And I mean, that's just an awesome segue for him right out of retiring in December, going right into the coaching ranks at AAA level. It speaks to what he's thought of in the greater MLB community. Like, that's a big deal. I mean, he played at that same affiliate, I think in 2023. So there's a relationship there. But, you know, for a well-traveled veteran who played a bunch in the major leagues and had an all-star season in 2019, we got to see him in the Sounds outfield. And man, it was a joy to watch. He ended up leaving, I believe it was by his own volition with one of those prearranged deals, but I thought that was really cool. So anyhow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's always cool to see former Brewers or Brewers minor leaguers getting into coaching. I saw Jimmy Nelson's in the Mets organization as a pitching coach now, which is cool to see. So very cool to see that happening. It's always, I mean, you watch them play, but then just to see what they do in their next life, sometimes all of a sudden you'll come across someone who's announcing and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know he was doing that now. Like, that type of stuff is always fun. So good to see from that for sure. And then the last thing we'll touch on is really just World Baseball Classic rosters came out. I think most people probably know about the big leaguers who made it, but there are some prospects who maybe flew under the radar as to falling on some of these rosters. So for Team Canada, Tyler Black will be on the roster. Team Italy, maybe the biggest surprise here was no Sal Frelick, but Andrew Fisher being on the roster. I didn't know there was Italian heritage there or anything, but cool. That'll be a really good opportunity for him to get some reps against some pretty good competition that he probably wouldn't have got as much because he wasn't invited to big league camp. So this is kind of a chance for him to play some high level games against some good competition. And that's a cool experience for him and probably will bode well for him moving forward too. For Great Britain, we've got Miles Langhorne and Jack Seppings. We talked about both of them in some of the earlier episodes as some interesting relief prospects. And that's a cool experience for them too. I mean, they're going to get to face some really good hitters that'll be a good test for those two. And then for Nicaragua, we have Freddie Zamora, who we're going to talk about a little bit more today. Steven Cruz, who we've talked about probably on a couple episodes this year. And then Carlos Rodriguez, the pitcher, who last time the World Baseball Classic was going on, actually had a really, really nice showing against Puerto Rico, I believe. He was kind of the ace as a guy who was still a 21-year-old prospect at the time, I believe. So that was a cool moment for him. He'll probably be up there in their rotation again this year. And we've seen him in the big leagues, and we are going to talk about him a little bit more too. But while he has lost some of that prospect shine, I do think people maybe haven't fully appreciated what he's done for the big league teams a couple times the last couple of years, where he comes up, does exactly what they need from him in terms of eating innings. He goes out there and he pitches 2 hours after a rain delay after he finished the inning before it. Like, those types of things. I don't know how much longer he'll be in the organization. He's definitely running out of option years. I think this is probably his last one. So like, it's probably not a super long-term for the Brewers organization thing, but he has good enough stuff and he clearly is willing to do whatever the team needs. And that tends to give you a lot of opportunities. So definitely be rooting for him in this tournament as well. But yeah, I mean, 7 prospects that, some of them on the 40-man and most of them not, and one of them being a really exciting first-round pick from last year. I mean, that's cool to see. It also gives a little bit more reason to watch even more World Baseball Classic. So I'm sure I'll be tuning in as often as I possibly can and trying to catch these guys getting their opportunities too. But that can lead us into the Sounds Talk. And like I said, I'm not going to promise it'll be short because I refuse to do that because it might end up being longer than I'm expecting. But I think this will move pretty quick. And then, like I said, we've got a lot of questions from people that are going to be covering kind of just the overall system. So moving into this secondary part of the podcast here and pulling up just the season in review that we've gone through for all the teams. And this was a good season for the Sounds. An 85-63 record. It was a tough league to be in for them this year. They ended up missing the playoffs despite having that strong of a season. 44-29 first half, a 41-34 second half. Pretty consistently competitive pretty much all year. Like, there were not very many downturns, and we'll go through that when we go through these month-long records in a second, but it was a pretty consistent team. Really just 1 month under 500 the whole year. So there was a lot of good this year. I always give credit to Rick Sweet, who's now been in the organization for a very long time and been coaching in the minors for a very, very long time, for his job, because the Brewers, I mean, everyone who follows the Brewers knows the constant shuffle that is AAA to the big leagues, and he's constantly got to manage guys who have pitched the day before in the big leagues and are unavailable in AAA, even though they're on the roster. But he also lost 2 guys who went up to the big leagues, and these guys opted out because they're at that point in their contract where they get to opt out and find a new team if they aren't getting the opportunity they're hoping for. And there's just so much that he has to manage at the AAA level. And I think he does a really good job of, obviously the Brewers are very happy with how he's handling things too, because he's kind of got to roll out what they are asking him to roll out, get guys opportunities in spots they want to see them. And again, it was a lot of good baseball. It was a lot of good stuff this year. So moving through it from an organizational month-by-month look here, March and April, the Sounds ended up going 16-12. They went 16-11 in May, 14-11 in June, 14-9 in July. August, they went 12-16. That was the one downturn month for them. And that was a tough schedule. They struggled through it a little bit, and that was, again, a time where the Brewers were dealing with a lot of injuries, and they had been calling people up, and they lost a little bit of their normal roster during that stretch. And then they finished strong at 13-5 in September for that overall 85-63 record. So Joseph, just, you can talk about August specifically, but also just generally kind of how the season went. What did you see from the Sounds throughout the course of the year?
Yeah, I think it's very fair to say that as a whole, they were the most consistent team in all of the Brewers minor leagues. And it's a real, to your point about Rick Sweet and the staff there, it's just a real testament to their ability to do this pretty much every year. It's kind of uncanny. And there's a reason why Rick Sweet is up there in the top. I think now is he top 3 or is it top 5? I can't remember. Anyhow, overall minor league win list for minor league managers. Like, he's a fun manager to watch. He's got a great mustache, and he gets testy and he gets combative with umps. Not often, but when he does, he has a very good reason, and he's unafraid to show it. Really has a pulse on the pitching staff. Really good with the players. Really good with the pitchers when he comes to the mound. He's just man, I love watching him. But yeah, that August, man, in both the first half and the second half, they just ran it. Like, first half, I think, was the Buzzsaw that was Lehigh Valley, which was the Phillies affiliate. And then the second half, it was Yankees and Scranton Wilkes-Barre. Like, there was that stretch. They closed July and then started that early August with Scranton Wilkes-Barre and then Jacksonville, where they got swept by Jacksonville after a 2-4 showing against Scranton. So that was a rough stretch. It really set them back. So it was a testament to them that they got to 8 games back, and it was a heck of a finish in September. But yeah, as a whole, every season there's guys that sign as these minor league free agents that just end up being so crucial for that team of the Sounds. And last year's guy was Bruce Zimmerman, really. We're not going to talk about him today, but we saw him for a spot start late in the year in Milwaukee. But man, he opted out of his contract midseason, then re-signed with a new contract with the Brewers, and he just ate up so many quality AAA innings. And it was much like the Mitch White experience, a couple years back. It's just they always find these guys that just come in and fill the void, and it's incredible. So it'll be interesting to see who it is this season. But as a whole, most consistently enjoyable team to watch all year. They were just consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. They were, for the most part, and I think we probably talked about this last year, but for the most part, AAA is often the team that's kind of the least exciting to watch on a day-to-day basis for the Brewers, especially because most of their talent prior to this season was often in the lower levels. Even when you look back at like the Mitchell, Freelick, Weimer, those guys coming through, like they weren't there very long. So you were mostly talking about kind of those quad A players, a lot of depth pieces, and it's good baseball compared to like the lower levels. It's better baseball compared to the lower levels, but there's often like the lack of that star power. But because the Brewers were shuffling quite a few interesting big leaguers up and down, and then on the pitching side, you had a bunch of guys who were legitimate prospects, one of them obviously being Miz, who ended up in the big leagues after a while, but also we were seeing Logan Henderson, Chad Patrick, a bunch of those guys spending some time down there. It was always pretty fun to tune in and watch those games, and Jeff Hem does a great job on the call too, so that makes it easy to tune in and really enjoy the overall broadcast. But I had more time watching AAA games than I could really remember in the past this year, and like most of the time I have most of the games on, but just more time like actually truly focused on the AAA game. And part of it will be Jeferson Quero, which we'll get into in a second here, because we're going to move into the position players, and really the one main guy who is returning who hasn't already seen the big leagues is Jeferson Quero. So we tiered it again. Like I said, we only have 7 guys that are even on here, and 4 of them have already been in the big leagues and are on the 40-man. So we're really talking about 3 prospects, truly prospects. But Jeferson Quero is the one guy I had in the MLB Caliber Tools. I won't say there's no questions, because there is one definite question, and we got questions about it from a couple of people. But I think the overall profile for Quero, despite the questions that we do have at the moment, is still really, really interesting, exciting. He's on the doorstep of the big leagues with a lot of ability. But let's jump into the questions we got, because it's a really important piece of the puzzle here. So Do Wizard asked, thoughts on what will happen to Quero? Can his defense bounce back? If not, how much do you think it will regress? Are we able to tell anything from his playing time in Venezuela? And then Ostentatious also asked, is there a feeling that Quero can get his arm strength close to what it was? So I would say the defense bouncing back, I think we're mostly talking about the arm here. And by the end of the season, what I would say is that outside of the arm, I thought pretty much everything I saw from him was either back to where it was pre-injury or even a little bit better. That's offensively and defensively. I thought the defense in terms of receiving, I've always liked how he called the game, which I do not compliment catchers on calling a game very often, but I've always liked how he calls a game. Receiving wise, it was getting better. I think he was always making strides, but I think it was to a point where it's like, oh yeah, that looks like a big league guy receiving the ball back there now. Blocking wise, I thought he had improved a bit from where he was. Like you mentioned earlier, Joseph, the bat had gotten to a point where by the end of the year, it's like, okay, yeah, that's what we were used to seeing prior to the injuries. Like, he's hitting the ball hard, he's hitting for some power, he can do it to all fields. The arm is the question, and my opinion on it, based on what I have seen and doing some of my own part-time work, which isn't, the greatest on minor league TV cameras. You're not necessarily always getting full flight of the ball. You're a little reliant on how did the camera flip? Did it flip at the exact same time? Are you adding or subtracting time because of how it flipped? It's not perfect, but as the season did progress and he was throwing a little bit more, it was coming down in a positive way, closer to where you would want it to be. Now, not where it was pre-injury. And even saying close to what it was, I don't know that it will be. And that's mainly because it was like a 70 arm prior to this injury. Like, it was a very, very legitimate plus arm. And I even had, some of the pop times he was throwing out there would be associated with like an 80 grade arm. Like, it was a cannon. The good news is that means even if he doesn't get back to where he was, it can still be a good arm. It can still be an average or better arm in terms of arm strength. I brought this up on Milwaukee Tailgate when I was on it a few weeks ago, and someone kind of asks similar question to this. But if you look at William Contreras' arm strength and just his arm strength last year, it wasn't very good, but he caught a bunch of runners. You can still make up for it with an accurate arm, with a quick release. You can still make up for not having a super strong arm. And I think Quero is going to be a guy who's capable of that. Now he's still going to have to get used to throwing with a bunch of screws in his shoulder. Like it's a different situation than he's had prior to this injury. I'm not that concerned that it's going to be like, oh, Jeferson Quero can't catch in the big leagues because of the arm. I think the question, and maybe the thing that this changes, is it goes from he was a game-changing defender, a guy who could wreck a game, who could cause teams to be completely afraid to run, who could have guys just stuck on first when they got there, to someone who's not that, who's somebody who's maybe closer to the average in terms of like, okay, we feel comfortable enough running on him as long as the pitcher's giving us enough time to do it on their side of things. And that doesn't rule out anything in terms of like his true ability to catch at the big league level, but it does limit his ceiling. I don't think there's any question about that. It goes from truly a game changer on defense to somebody who can do a ton of really good things on defense, but only just to that above average or better level instead of like that elite level where it just completely changes how an offense has to operate. So that's how I am viewing it. And that's some of that is probably wish casting based off of how he finished offensively. I think we saw some struggles early on, but also not only was he coming off the shoulder, then he got hurt right away when he was in spring training, and then he got hurt as he was kind of getting into a groove in AAA. There's just been a lot that he's had to work through. So having seen him so much over the years and knowing outside of the arm how many good things he can do, I think I'm probably banking on most of that being not much of a problem, but the arm is a legitimate concern. And I guess my question for you, Joseph, is do you agree with that? Or do you think if the arm, well, I shouldn't even say, because I didn't really mention, if the arm doesn't get any better than it was this year, like, yeah, that will probably be a little bit more of a problem. I'm expecting it to get back to like that average-ish level at the very least. So I'm including that in my kind of fast forwarding and looking at his future. But what are your thoughts on it? Do you think the arm needs to get back to that level for him to be a big leaguer? Do you think he can make it work with what he's got? Does it need to at least improve a little? Like, how are you looking at it?
Yeah. I don't think it needs to get back to where it was. Would it be great? Absolutely. I don't think it's likely even, but how I look at it is if we could see something comparable to like what we saw with Woodruff, where, he was no longer touching 98, but Big Woo was still hitting 95 occasionally, 96. Did he? I don't even know if he did, but, sitting 92, 93. But to your earlier point here, the thing that stood out above and beyond, like the arm was always going to be an issue, especially in year one. I think we all knew that. But he was bigger. Like he looked the part. He no longer looked like the raw athletic teenager. He looked like he took that offseason and got strong. So behind the plate, any questions I had previously about his ability to block things completely went out the window because I was looking at a man. Like this was a man's man. And so by the end of the season, to have his blocking improve, his framing was good. His just his general defensive effort outside of the throws to second base was really, really solid. Then to see the bat return in a way that was probably more potent also than it ever was before. Like before, we saw a couple flashes, but there was some significant pull shots he ripped at the end of the season. Like he was getting a hold of balls. And so where I left the season, like, yes, I am still concerned to see where that arm is. But there is a world in which I see Reese McGuire signing solely as insurance, and Quero is their preferred backup. There is a world where I could see that playing out if his arm has improved that much, because he's got more raw talent than Reese McGuire ever will. I mean, I think that's quite obvious, especially at this age. But the slowness by which he'll get to the major league level will largely be dictated if he can get back to an average or slightly above average arm. And so I think likely to start the year in AAA just to kind of prove that. And hopefully there's some reasonable improvements there. But then if he does show those reasonable improvements, I think he'll be knocking on that door and making it hard for McGuire to stay up there, because if he starts hitting the way he did, what else does he really have left to prove at that point? So they're going to need to get him up to the major league level. But yeah, if he doesn't get that back, then his upside absolutely lowers, because you're looking at a guy who more than likely just becomes a platoon guy, unfortunately. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. He's still, what I will say is, by the end of the season as well, there was a period of time in the beginning of the year when Dingus was just electrically hot and was doing all the things we wanted to see, and Quero was really scuffling. And I legitimately asked, I said, is Dingus the better catching prospect? By the end of the season, I absolutely was like, no, sorry, no way. He's got to be healthy, right? And so we haven't even seen that. Didn't make it through fall league. So all I know right now about Dingus is he's this really big, athletic, talented ball of clay who has a penchant for not making it through long stretches of baseball. Quero has battled a lot of things. Had that couple nagging injuries this year, but to see him make it through the full season too and grind it out, it said a lot to me. And so, man, I'm really, really pulling for him. Really pulling for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it'd be a little surprising to me now if he does end up being the backup out of spring, but I wouldn't say that would mean anything in terms of I could see it being 2 weeks before he's up. He just hasn't caught in a short period of time a lot at any point. He was getting so many days off or DH days mixed in that I kind of feel like they're just going to want to get him in AAA where he, not because they don't think he could develop as a backup, because I think that's the concern for a lot of people. I think they just want to make sure he can handle a workload in case somebody like Contreras did get hurt and all of a sudden Quero does have to jump in and play every game for a stretch. That's probably the main reason I'm kind of expecting him to end up there. But you could also get that in spring where you having basically catching every day, doing things. I mean, there's a lot of work for catchers in spring in general. You might be able to figure that out there, but that's kind of the main thing I'm wondering about in terms of him ending up in AAA just to start the year. We did also, from Ostentatious, he added on as an aside, I wonder about the insane number of injuries we've suffered from guys diving back to a base. Is there something to study there? He lists Jimmy Nelson, Quero, Garrett Mitchell. He says, I think there have been others. I do believe that Eric Brown Jr., one of his injuries was due to that. We have had quite a few in the Brewers organization. I think that's mostly just a dumb luck thing, unfortunate. I don't know most of the time if there's anything. Now, Jimmy Nelson jammed himself into the base because he was a pitcher who had never had to dive back into first at the big league level at any point, but he hit a ball that he never hit at the big league level off the fence and then realized, oh no, I am not making it to second, dives back in, and that's what happens. But no, I think it's more an unlucky coincidence than anything else, but it is frustrating and annoying, the fact that they've had a lot of not just injuries in that regard, but talented injuries in that regard, guys who you really, Jimmy Nelson being on that 2018 team could have made a bit of a difference in that, in a series that goes 7 games with the Dodgers. Those types of things that sucks. But yeah, I don't think it's anything the Brewers are doing or teaching. I think it's just kind of been bad luck, and hopefully we've already used up all the bad luck on that. So hopefully we don't see it going forward anymore. But that can take us into really just a group of 4 guys who spent few weeks at a time in the big leagues for the most part last year. Kind of MLB caliber players, but with some questions for sure. So Anthony Seigler, Stuart Baroa, Brandon Lockridge, and Tyler Black. I've kind of mentioned all of them except Seigler to this point already. I'll start with Seigler because this is a guy that I'm going to continue backing until he fully proves that I shouldn't be. I know he was not super popular with the fan base at times throughout his time in the big leagues. I still would maintain that outside of the last week or so, almost everything he was doing process-wise was really good. I think he got to a point where he all of a sudden started worrying about not getting those results, which is understandable. At the big league level, eventually you do need the results. But then his process got bad, and that was when the Brewers moved on to and sent him back down to AAA. And I think that pretty much the entire way the Brewers handled that was exactly how I would have if I were in their position. I thought they handled it really well. I thought he deserved the opportunities he got until the moment that he stopped getting them, which is when I was kind of like, okay, I like Anthony Seigler. I think he's a 2026 guy that helps the team at this point. I don't know if it's going to happen in 2025, and that's okay. But his AAA season was tremendous. He was the Swiss Army knife for the team, able to play all over the field, do pretty much anything they needed him to do, hit in any spot in the lineup. The results were very good at the AAA level, as was the process. There were very few holes to poke. Even when you put him at catcher, like he looks like a guy who, if he had to fill in at the big league level, I would feel comfortable with him doing it. So there's so much value in a guy who has legitimately that much utility. I still maintain on my end that he's somebody that's going to help this 2026 team at the big league level. And he'll probably help the Sounds quite a bit as well, because he will be spending time there for sure throughout the course of the season, I would imagine, unless a bunch of injuries happen in spring. But really, really fun player. I am glad that they pretty much went to the lefty-only approach at the plate. He just really struggled as a righty hitter. It just really wasn't working out. So I do think that's the right move that they made there. But there's a lot that I like in Seigler. He seems like a really good dude who was truly there at the big league level for the right reasons, which I think is also why Murph kept giving him opportunities, even though he was struggling at times. Like he wanted to help win. He was doing everything that he could. And you could even see during the playoffs, during the stretch run when he was back on the bench, he was on the top step. He was jumping over the railing, going nuts. And he hadn't been with the team really for a month. Like he seems like he's a good dude. I really like the process-based stuff. And I still think there's something there that's going to end up helping the Brewers at the big league level this year. But Joseph, feel free to agree or disagree on that, but also just watching him consistently in AAA this year, what did you see from Seigler?
Man, yeah, I love Seigler. And, man, I really – it's fascinating because when you cover the minor leagues and you watch as much minor league baseball of the Brewers like you and I do, you see the greater scope of what a player's been doing. And so it really chapped my hide when I was hearing the Brewers fans just absolutely lay into him, where I was like, man, first of all, he's getting limited opportunities, and this is his first chance in the big leagues. It's like, give the guy a break. And his process was good until it wasn't. Like, it was good. He wasn't getting the results, and then it kind of just tailspun in the wrong direction. Okay, great. So you play the process out. But there's this great interviews every week from Jeff Hem. He does the clubhouse interviews with Rick Sweet, members of the staff, and some of the players. And there was this distinct interview early in the season where Rick Sweet said they call Anthony Seigler an outdoor cat, meaning he is a baseball player through and through to the gills, lives and breathes baseball. An outdoor cat, obviously a farm cat, lives outside. It's true cat to its true nature. And so I was just like, oh man, I love that. And like Pat Murphy waxes poetic about Luis Lara. Well, when I saw Rick Sweet wax poetic about Seigler, I was like, oh, he's going to the big leagues. He's going to play a part at some point. And he earned it. That was the thing. Like, by the time he got up there, he was on an absolute heater in Nashville, where he was getting on base all the time. He was hitting gap power a little bit. It was just such a joy to watch. And he was filling in at second base. He's playing backup catcher from time to time. I mean, he's just a good baseball player. And I was excited that he got his first, his feet wet for the first time at major league level. But that is a guy, I just think he's going to be better from here. He experienced that success. He puts forth such effort. I have no reason to doubt that he couldn't help in 2026. And I can already see it. It's going to be meme worthy. The fans will gripe, they'll complain. I will not be that fan. I will be absolutely in his corner. I will be excited for the opportunity he gets, and I will hope he runs with it. Because, man, when he's finding the outfield grass with his hits and he's finding the hole, baseball can be a very cruel game, especially for a call-up. I just feel like if he can get a little bit of luck, get his feet firmly on the ground at the major league level, he'll set himself up to be a utility guy for years. And so I hope that happens.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, like, he actually had a very similar start in AAA this year. He wasn't getting very good results early on. It was a not as bad on the scale in terms of results, but I was really excited about what I was seeing early on, and I was telling Jack about it, and he was like, he just looked quickly and he's like, oh, it's like he's not hitting very well. I was like, he isn't? Because I've been watching so much that I was like, he's doing a lot of good things. Like, I hadn't even looked at his stats at that point, and I looked, and yeah, he had struggled in terms of results. And then I looked at like his expected stats, and all of them, similar to how they were in the big leagues at first, they were like double what he was getting in terms of actual results. And that was also part of the reason I was like, okay, he's already kind of gone through this. I think he's going to come out of the other side in the big leagues. But it did get to the point where I think he just started chasing it a little bit. And when you do that, that's when you get in trouble. And that's what a young dude does when he can feel his roster spot is kind of hanging on. Okay, we like a lot of what you're doing. And Murph publicly is saying we like a lot of what you're doing, but you also know at some point the results have to be there. And I think he pressed a little bit for a little bit, but I fully expect him to be somebody who's helping this team moving forward. So looking forward to that. But moving to our main two center fielder guys in this group here, and that's Stuart Baroa and Brandon Lockridge. Joseph, for those two, I don't want to group them together completely, partially because the Brewers seem to be very, very high on Brandon Lockridge. Like, they really like Brandon Lockridge. Jack wrote an article about some of it, and like, there's definitely things, there's a lot to like defensively, a lot to like in the speed. I think the bat is where the Brewers seem to be the high person team org on Lockridge. Like, they seem to think there's really something there offensively. He did show some good things when he got to Nashville, though, especially on the offensive side. So I guess for him specifically, and then for Baroa, how do you view them going forward? And what did you see from them mostly in their AAA stints?
Yeah, real quickly, I just wanted to say before we move fully on from Seigler that it was fascinating. How you were saying, like, he started slow in the year. You saw two players at Nashville, and one of them is not going to be on this list because he's no longer with the org, but the other one was Raynel Delgado. And, man, I was texting you late in the season there where I was like, my God, is he going to get the MVP of Nashville? Like, he was just, like, on an absolute tear, and he also went through a stretch earlier in the season where you were like, gosh, is Ray Delgado ever going to hit the ball? And then he just took off and he did everything. And man, that was a player I was really sad to leave go. As you know, I was a big, like, from the first series, I just told you, remember texting you, I was like, oh man, you're going to love the way this guy plays. He was just, fun to watch. And it was so great to see that run at the end of the year where he was making a serious candidacy for like a roster at the major league level, I thought. But so kudos to Raynel Delgado, and I hope he has a great season elsewhere. So yeah, Baroa is it's funny. He's like this feisty, he's got this really charismatic personality in the center field grass. Like, he's a little bit of a showman. So it's pretty fun to watch. He's very small. But he's really had he had a very good winter league. Now, the asterisk there is, I don't really know what winter league means anymore, because it seems like there's a lot of guys who have good winter leagues and then they don't do anything in affiliated ball. Burrow hasn't been a guy who tears it off in affiliated ball, but there's another guy. If you remember Chris Roller, who was on the 40-man for quite a bit, and he's no longer with the organization. But Stuart Burrow is a kind of a guy like that, where, they're looking at him like he is absolutely going to cover the alleys. He will absolutely go to the wall. So he's going to cause havoc defensively. If he gets on base, he's going to be able to run. He's got wheels for days. Great personality. I don't know. The major league level is such a jump. I don't know if he, maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. I don't know, but he's more of a serviceable guy to fill in. Lockridge, he did some really good things in Nashville. I don't quite know what we have with Lockridge yet. It's too early. I thought he actually had some moments with the Brewers, like he wasn't hurting them. I know the Padres fan base was not at all sad to see him go. But, the Brewers do this. They find guys like Lockridge and like Baroa, and they have no qualms about getting them opportunities, especially if they can cover the outfield grass. Like, they have no qualms. I think it's a big question mark if either will ever have a distinct impact at the major league level, and I think it's actually doubtful. But who knows? I certainly don't. It's just my opinion. Will they impact the squad in 2026? I tend to think not, honestly, if I look at who's ahead of them. But they're certainly in that first tier, as you were saying earlier, before all of these free agent signings. These are going to be the first two guys, 100%, that are going to get that chance. And again, like, Burrow's numbers won't pop, but he is very entertaining to watch. He just has that kind of like bounce in his step and a little bit of flair on that center field grass. Like, if he makes a good catch, he'll let the crowd know. It's pretty great. I enjoyed watching him immensely. And to see him have a good winter league in a pretty competitive environment, that's a good sign. It's not a bad sign. I don't know if it's going to carry over. I guess we'll have to see in spring training. But as we know, it could be a Vinny Capper experience as well. So who knows? I tend to just kind of land at the end of the day, like, will they? Not likely, but they'll probably get opportunities.
Yeah, I think just the way I've heard people in the organization talk about Lockridge just makes me think they view him as for sure the top guy from this group. And I think we'll see him, just assuming that we probably don't get a healthy Mitchell. And then at that point, it's Perkins for the most part, and you'll get some Yelich in the outfield. But you probably will be at Lockridge at that point. And when he was on the roster, like you said, he played and he didn't hurt the team. He was out there helping, doing whatever they needed him to do. And if the org really thinks he's going to hit at least to a decent level, like, yeah, there absolutely could be value there if the bat plays at the big league level. I think that's the question, and we'll see how it goes. And yeah, Baroa, man, he's basically dancing out there after he catches a ball and runs into a wall. Like, it's great. I love it. Like, it is. Yeah. It's a little like less combative than Nyjer Morgan, but it reminds me a little bit of Nyjer Morgan out there when he would really get going after making a nice play and get pumped up. Maybe more Carlos Gomez, like, I guess, to that extent. He wasn't as angry with fans who were sitting out there as Morgan was, but no, it's fun. It's fun to watch him out there. So yeah, they're both guys who can just get the job done if they're in the big league level. And we can finish off this tier here with Tyler Black. We've talked about Black, last year. I don't really think our thoughts have changed too much on him. He's at the moment, he's kind of that fringe big leaguer. It was nice to see him perform better at the big league level when he got his chance, but he performed a lot worse at the AAA level than he had last year. So right now it's just Black is kind of, he's kind of finding some positions, but they're not really ones the Brewers need. He's not hitting to the level that he was showing earlier in his minor league career. He's still a good athlete. He's still got a bunch of ability. It just feels like a guy who kind of needs that change of scenery. And I think we talked about that even going back to doing this podcast last offseason. it still feels like that's when he's going to get his real chances if it's with somebody else. But right now, like I said, he got his chance this year. He did a pretty decent job when he got it, but it's just going to be hard to envision too many of those opportunities coming around for the Brewers. Is that kind of how you view it too?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to really, really start hitting the ball to get back on, I think, to get really back on the track of serious consideration. Man, I just saw a frustrated baseball player, frankly. He did well at the major league level, and that was really encouraging. Like he was finding holes to get those oppo little flares. Like he's got wheels. He's a good athlete. I don't think he's ever going to be comfortable defensively anywhere. I just don't. Left field, you can kind of hide him, but you also kind of can't. It's just not natural. His jumps are. I mean, granted, this was his first real exposure, so that needs to be said. But his jumps weren't really. They weren't lively. It took him a little bit to see the ball. His glove has just never been pure, but the outfield is where I just personally have always thought and still think that's where he needs to land because his natural speed can take over. If he can start reading the ball better off the bat, he'll be able to cover the ground to get to the gaps. Like when he was before he got injured back in like his rookie year, man, he had some plays in center field that I was astounded by. Now, he hasn't really ever gotten back to that opportunity, but he's got the athleticism. But man, it's the hit tool. Like it just has fallen off the map in the last year plus. And that is a big deal. Before that happened, we were seeing spurts of power. We were starting to dream on maybe he's going to have more power than we thought, but man, the exit velos, the averages, they just weren't good. Like all the stuff under the hood gave you pause. And that's why I wind up as change of scenery would be best for him. And I think that's ultimately where it heads. But man, he is so talented too. It's like we've seen him very good. And it was only like 2 years ago. And he was very good. And it's just, you wonder what really happened here. It's just, I have no idea. So that's why I kind of say, like, it just feels like a frustrated baseball player because he's not getting the serious opportunity. He's been thrown all around defensively. He's had really challenging times at both first base and third base. They took him out of second base, and left field was a brand new position. I think there's a lot going on for him, and he's trying to reclaim that status he once had. It could happen. I tend to, like my earlier points with Lockridge and Burrow, I tend to think will it happen? I think that's a lot to invest in. But man, I hope it does, because when he's hitting and he's hitting line drives and he's making meaningful contact with his wheels, he turns doubles into triples. He can steal bases, and then he throw in that little bit of pop. Man, that's why he was at one point in time like a top 5 prospect in the Brewers organization. But man, it's not easy to keep up at that level as we're finding. And I think Tyler Black is an example of that. So to say, it would be an understatement to say that this is a big season for Tyler Black. Like this is his make or break with the Brewers right here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. The final two we'll touch on, I think we can pretty much loop together. And we talked about Ethan Murray last week, or a couple of weeks ago, I guess, last episode. This is kind of like I view them kind of like the Burrow of the infield, because it's definitely defense over offense for both of them. Just the complete lack of actual pop in the back. Now, Murray has showed a little more pop in the we saw in AAA, which was basically zero power. Ethan Murray, I am pretty confident that's the real Freddie Zamora at this point, because we've seen it over a period of a few years, really. But they're light hitting defensive infielders who can both handle shortstop. I would say Zamora probably at a little bit better level than Murray, but there's some value in them being there. They both have moved around the infield, especially Murray has experienced pretty much every infield spot and some outfield at times in Biloxi. But yeah, these are two guys that are like break in case of emergency and then feel comfortable DFAing if you need a spot afterwards. That's pretty much where they're at this point. But that is not bad depth to have in AAA. You need guys like that. And they will help the Sounds over the course of a season, like Zamora did last year and Murray especially did in AA. So good guys to have, guys who were draft picks but haven't quite lived up to what you were hoping to get out of them, but have at least been solid or guys. Is that more or less how you view them too?
Yeah, man, Ethan really gave us something to dream on when he was starting to hit for power with Biloxi. And then, man, when you saw him like fall off the precipice in Nashville, excuse me, I mute my coughs here for y'all. I'm proud of myself. I have not coughed into the microphone once. Y'all are lucky. And maybe I'm jinxing myself. But yeah, I was, it's no secret. I love Ethan Murray. I think that his defense at third base and second base is an absolute luxury, and his glove is so good because of his shortstop experience. He's got a cannon. He started hitting for a little bit of power, like meaningful power down Biloxi, which is a very, notoriously Southern League, as we've talked about before, just not a good hitting league. But gosh, it just shows you the levels to the levels in every sport, but in baseball, it's just so wild. And that's why gonna just put a plug in for Mate again, but that's why what he did and what Churio did, it's just so impressive because you just don't see that. Whereas you see a guy like Ethan Murray, who's a very talented guy, but has limitations to that talent, gets up to the AAA level. And, we at a certain point in time last year, we were dreaming on maybe Ethan Murray could be a candidate to go up to no, it is not. He needs more seasoning. And so this will be a big year to see, can he hit AAA? Can he hit in the International League? Because if he can't hit in the International League, well, this is probably where the buck stops for Ethan Murray. Freddie Zamora, I think, actually had his best season as a Brewers prospect by a long stretch because of how consistent he was defensively. For years, I have lamented Zamora's like mental mistakes in the infield, and last year he was a true professional in every respect. So you saw a guy who could actually down the line vie for a utility role in a major league clubhouse. The only addendum there is, to your point, he hits for absolutely zero power, like zero, and doesn't really hit for much of anything other than singles. Hits occasional doubles, sure, but that's not his forte. I will say, though, for a guy, if you're putting him in the 7 to 9 spot, he has shown he can hit clutch hits, and that's important. And so that was another thing that stood out to me this season, is that in the limited opportunities they have to send runners aboard, whether it was in extras or to go to extra, he would find the hole up the middle. Of course, it wouldn't be a 3-run jack. It would be a single that had sent runners home, like a runner home and then advanced runners. But that means something. And so this was his best season, like by a pretty large stretch. And, it was his second season in AAA. Will we see a similar adjustment from Ethan Murray? I don't know. But I thought above and beyond, Zamora actually stated his case that he is a solid, in case of emergency, break glass. He could handle shortstop duties, I think, for a brief spell. Probably wouldn't hurt you. He's going to give you better defense there than Monasterio, in my opinion. I think that's not a stretch, but maybe other people disagree. But that's pretty much, that's where it's at with those two for me.
Yeah, I think all of that is very fair. That can lead us into our pitchers, because a lot of these guys are going to be familiar names, either that we've already talked about or you've already seen at the big league level. But we did want to touch on pretty much everyone who spent at least a decent amount of time in AAA, just because we didn't really want to pick and choose which ones to go through. So we figured we'll hit on all the guys, unless they were like really, really small cup of coffee in AAA, or it was rehab assignment or something like that. We weren't going to talk about them, but we can start on the starting side of things with Jacob Mizorowski and Logan Henderson. I think those are two that are probably tied together a little bit more than the rest of them are in terms of where they were as prospects prospects coming into the debuted in a very, very level when they got to the big leagues this year. The growth in his command. I mean, I talked about it in spring when I saw him a couple of times, and he had bad results in spring, but just the way he was moving, it seemed much more repeatable. He looked like somebody who was figuring out how to use his body the correct way and kind of growing into his body a little bit. And that really showed up in AAA. Like the command and the control got to a point where he was ready for the big leagues. The stuff was never a question at any point. The command came around to the point that it needed to. So that was really good to see. He obviously got to the big leagues. He showed really well early on, had some struggles, bounced back really well at the end of the season, and helped out of the bullpen. I think everyone feels quite good about Jacob Misiorowski moving forward, but that doesn't mean there aren't going to be some struggles built in and everything else. Tying him in with Henderson. Henderson also had things to work on in AAA, and we got a question from Do Wizard on him and basically on that main question for him. And he said, thoughts on Logan Henderson. I've loved the guy for years, but without a third pitch, I worry what his ceiling is. Do the cutter or slider look like something that could develop decently enough? So it's a really good fastball. It's not huge velocity, but it's a really, really good fastball shape. It's a really good changeup. We saw that it worked at the big league level. But the question, as pointed out, is something going glove side. He needs something to go glove side, especially to be a starter. My opinion on it is that, and we'll talk about this when we get to Chad Patrick too, but I do think cutter is going to be the best likelihood of something working out for him. He's clearly not a supinator, which is when you get your hand on the outside of the ball, compared to a pronator who works on the inside. If you think of a pronator, you especially think of like a Devin Williams who does it to an insane degree, as does one of the relievers we'll get to in a little bit here. But supinators are usually good at throwing breaking balls or cutters. That's not really how his arm moves. He gets behind the ball really well and he pronates well and throws a nasty changeup. Most of the time, those types are going to have to go the cutter route because it's just hard for them to do anything else. Chad Patrick had a little bit of that going on, although he cut the ball naturally. He struggled to throw actual breaking balls. I think that's a little different because he had a really long hit. It was the length of his fingers that were messing with his ability to throw breaking balls. So he found one. We'll talk about that in a second because a lot of it happened in AAA, but I'm not convinced Henderson's ever really going to be able to throw a great breaking ball. Now, reports this offseason are that he is he's trying to bring his curveball back. That's something that he threw in college. My guess is when we see the shape of this curveball, it's actually going to be closer to a slider. I don't think he's ever really had a curveball, even because I found some of his data from when he was in college, and it was like, okay, that's basically a slider. But if he can throw it, that would be really helpful. And I don't care what he calls it. I just need it to be something that goes glove side. So my answer to the question is, I think the best chance of getting something that truly is different is the curveball that he hasn't been throwing for a while. So spring this year, if we get any chances to see it. But if I have to pick between the two, I would go cutter feels more likely to me to work out if I have to choose between the two. But with Miz and Henderson, Jeferson, but two guys who showed that they could absolutely handle the big league level with their current stuff already, but with both of them having some questions, I guess. What did you see from them in AAA? How do you view them going forward? Are they both starters for you? Do you think one of them ends up in the pen or both? How do you view those two?
Well, with Hendo, it's always health for me. And, he's dealt with that his entire career as a professional. Last year was no different. He would throw that curveball. I'm convinced. Did we not see him throw that curveball in his debut out of college? Like, I remember as a Mudcat, he was thrown it occasionally. Am I misremembering that? And then they just scrapped it. It felt like. But
So,
God,
I think
that was years ago.
I think what happened with that is that I think people thought he was. Yeah, I think the changeup was getting read as a lefty curveball by TrackMan into pro ball. So I think announcers were saying he was throwing a curveball, and we were so offset on those cameras that we weren't actually getting a good view of it.
That would track
with
spinning
it. The spin rates they were saying are nothing like he was throwing on his breaking ball. So I think that's what it was.
Yeah, but he set rookie records in the Brewer annals. It was like, my whole thing with that is that, yes, would it be great to have a third pitch? 100%. Obviously, the more pitches a pitcher has that he can master, the more dangerous he is, especially when you have the competitive nature that Logan Henderson does. However, it's not a bad thing as well to envision whatever role he carves out in the Brewers pitching staff just being the two pitches, because they work. Now, obviously, the danger is at the major league level. Teams will catch up to that. They certainly didn't catch up to that in 2025. Does that mean that that's how it's going to be moving forward? No. And I think I tend to agree with you that the cutter is probably the natural pitch there. But getting back to Miz, I think, it was another thing that was just comical for me, for people to flip out when Miz would go through stretches of losing control. And I was like, man, if you watched as much Mizorowski innings as you and I have, you knew that what happened in the stretch to get him to the major league level was nothing short of dumbfounding. I had, as we were preparing for this episode, I went back to the early part of the Sound season where I was like, did I just see a Mizorowski changeup? Did you see that, Spencer? He just threw a changeup, and it was like what? It was like a string drop. I was like, where did this come from? Because it literally showed up out of the blue. And then suddenly he was in the zone all the time. That did not happen at all his entire minor league career. I think it's really important for the Brewers fans to understand that the blips he showed in 2025, where he, got a little erratic in a couple outings, the fact that he got back to the way he was by the end of the season and in the postseason just shows you how much incredible growth he has made as a pitcher in a year's time. To me, given what we saw, the sky is absolutely the limit for him. Because going into the season, the questions were, will he ever be able to replicate his throwing motion? Will he ever be able to control the zone? His biggest detractor from day one, Keith Law, that was his major, he's a reliever. From his rookie year onward, he held on to that opinion. But he proved a ton of doubters wrong last year. And I think, honestly, that may have been one of the most impressive professional seasons I have ever seen in all my years of watching Brewers baseball, just because of the quantum leap he made. To your point, he always had the stuff. That was never a question. Always had one of the best four-seamers in all of minor league baseball. Never a question. Always had elite extension. Never had a changeup that he was throwing with any regularity. I don't even remember a single one other than last year, frankly, and I might just be misremembering. But to bring that into the mix and then to dominate the zone, Storybook doesn't even describe it. It's just an unfathomable development. It truly is. And so, man, if there's a player to be excited about on the Brewers roster to start 2026, where is Jacob Mizorowski's stuff at to start the season? That's a big, boy, is it going to be? Because I'm still a little shaky in the boots. I still, even though we had it for that long, I don't know if I can fully believe it yet. So yeah, man, what a season.
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic season, and it, like you said, even though I thought I was seeing some signs of growth, I was not expecting what I saw this year. It was just fantastic. And yeah, the ceiling has always been incredible. the likelihood of reaching that ceiling always felt very up in the air. And I would still say it is to an extent, but he took huge strides this year in the right direction. And that's really good to see above anything else. The other guy that we saw a lot at the big league level was Chad Patrick, and that was your guy in 2024. As somebody who obviously had a very, very good season and did a lot of really good things at the AAA level and won the Triple Crown for the league at the AAA level. But we saw really good results early on. I thought for him, the process wasn't great early on. And then as the season progressed, I thought he showed a lot of really, really good things in terms of limiting walks, starting to strike more people out, showing the ability to get that soft contact and swing and miss that we had seen in AAA. He's in the starters category. I think it's fair to say reliever is very possible just because the guy looked dominant in that role when he got there in the bullpen or in the playoffs. So, like, I don't think you want to rule that out as something that he could end up doing in the future. But I do think going into this year, there's a pretty good chance he'll be in the rotation to begin the year. And you kind of know that down the road, if you have to move him to the pen, that shouldn't be much of a problem for him. He's seen a little velo jump when he goes out there. The stuff plays even better in a shorter stint. For me, a guy who, while I liked him, I wasn't as sold on. I think he was probably one of the most pleasant big league surprises for me last year in terms of like me truly believing in what he was putting out there in terms of results by the end of the year. It wasn't like that for me early on where I was looking at it and I was going, yes, this is nice. It's a good ERA. He's doing some good things for sure, but I don't know how much I buy it. By the end of the year, looking at everything he was doing and just saying, yeah, that's real. That none of this is made up. And a big part of that was the time that he spent in AAA after being sent down when, a lot of people understandably weren't thrilled with that decision, but it was also kind of the only decision that could be made in that moment for the Brewers roster. What did you see when he got down there that kind of helped lead to what we saw, especially when he came back at the end of the year?
Yeah, well, if you remember back in that Triple Crown winning season, the infamous Rule 5 decision to not protect Shane Smith that haunts me to this very day. Let us have a moment together. Okay, the moment's over. I was saying that, 40-manning Patrick was a no-brainer, and I was getting pushback from people on Brewer Fanatic who will remain nameless. You know who you are. I'm just kidding. But the thing is about Chad Patrick that just when you watch him pitch every day is that you see a guy who is committed to finding ways to improve himself above and beyond. And so even though I also was with you where I was not buying the version of Chad Patrick we were seeing at the MLB level when he was putting up good numbers and he was doing good things for the team, but I knew there was more to evolve. I just knew because if he's going to be the pitcher he needs to be at the major league level, he's got to add a wrinkle. And so what did he do when he went down to AAA? He added that just filthy breaker. Like, man, and he turned into arguably the best seventh inning guy the Brewers had by the postseason. Like, he was, remember, inheriting 2 runners on and mowing down the side in like a postseason environment and doing it with authority. Like, it was like, so if Mizorowski is 1A in terms of astounding season, Chad Patrick to me is 1B in terms of how he reinvented himself. But when he went down to Nashville, he didn't complain. He attacked his work. He worked explicitly with the pitching staff to add that wrinkle. And he came up to the major league level and threw it absolutely fearlessly in high octane, high tension environments. Man, if that didn't sell you on Chad Patrick and his makeup and his abilities, I don't know what will, because you could just say today, even if he doesn't go into the starting pitching staff, he's a weapon anywhere out of the bullpen, anywhere. Like, I have no doubts that Chad Patrick, if need be, could save a game for the Brewers. I have no doubts. Like, I'm that confident in his ability to rise to the occasion because he's a guy that just doesn't get flustered, and that's the other thing. And so I think above and beyond anything, what last season's ending did for us is show us that he is a major league pitcher. Now it's what kind of major league pitcher is he? Is it just what we saw at the end of the year? Was it a flash in the pan? Or is this something that he can get to at any moment in time? And if that's the case, that is a big deal for the Brewers pitching staff.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Coleman Crow's in this group. We talked about him mainly on the Shuckers podcast, so we won't cover him here. Robert Gasser, I didn't have much to touch on here, just the fact that it was good to see him come back and his stuff basically be in the same spot that it was pre-injury. Like, there was really no drop off. The stuff looked, unsurprisingly, maybe not at the level that we had seen before, but that's pretty common coming off of Tommy John as you get back into game action and some of that stuff. So that's really all I had on Gasser. We talked about Tate Keener quite a bit on the Shuckers podcast as well, as kind of that swing man. Maybe he's a starter, maybe he's a reliever, maybe he's a legitimate swing man where he's in that, sixth starter, long relief type role. And we already talked about Carlos Rodriguez as key group for sure too. But is there anything on any of those four that I went through, Crow, Gasser, Keener, and Carlos Rodriguez, that you'd like to add?
I mean, Crow and Gasser are huge wild cards for the Brewers staff. Like, man, if they come healthy and dialed in, those are two absurdly talented arms, like absurdly talented. I just want to impart that to fans. Like, when they are right and they're healthy and they're in control of their stuff, they are absurdly talented and could cause real damage on a major league staff. So don't sleep on those guys. Are they going to be? I don't know. That's a big if. Like, Gasser, I think he just looked like a guy to me that's an absurdly talented pitcher, but who came back from his first action off Tommy John. I wasn't expecting much. He was fine, but I have a feeling with an offseason under his belt, he's going to come back even more dangerous. Like, I have no doubts. He's just such a talented pitcher. I'm not going to touch on Keener. We touched on him a bunch, but I do want to touch, I feel like Carlos Rodriguez, I just hope that Brewers fans appreciate Carlos Rodriguez. Like, he hasn't really taken that next step from his former prospect status, but he's still a very good pitcher. He still has time to take that step if it happens. But more than anything, he has filled in every situation he's been asked to fill in on oftentimes very unfavorable conditions for any pitcher. And so I think that just deserves recognition. He's going to have a hard time getting meaningful innings in that staff, given that he's a starter. So he's definitely almost a shoo-in to start in Nashville and hope to work his way up there. But if there is a Tyler Black version of change of scenery on the pitching side, it probably is Carlos Rodriguez, just given where he's at in the greater prospect pantheon of the pitching depth the Brewers have, which is immense and multifaceted. But man, I appreciate him. I really do. He had a good end to his season. He had a pretty good September. Pitched a clean inning at the major league level, had some good outings with Nashville, ended his season on a good note. I'm hoping he does well in the WPC again.
Yeah, I think it's pretty likely we'll see him again at some point this season on the big league mound. It's just what type of role, how often we see him. That's probably the bigger question, but he'll be a really nice cog in the rotation for the Sounds this year, I would imagine, because he'll be down there to start the season, and he'll be somebody that'll get a lot of innings and help them out throughout the course of the season. Moving into our possible leverage relievers, bigger stuff type guys. Brian Fitzpatrick and Will Childers, we covered quite a bit in the Shuckers podcast as well. So those two are there, but we're not going to talk about them again. Craig Yoho, though, definitely need to touch on Yoho quickly. So again, absolutely dominated AAA. No problem for him. I mean, ERA under 1, still a ton of strikeouts, a ton of whiffs, a lot of really good things in AAA. But we saw some holes in the foundation, cracks in the foundation when he got to the big league level. And the question we got from Do Wizard on Yoho is, what's the next step for him to excel at the big league level? So for me, it is mostly command, just throwing his pitches where he wants them to be more often. He gets a lot of chase in the minor leagues, and Jack and I talked about this a lot when he got sent down. He almost gets too much chase in the minor leagues where it gives him an idea of, this is where I want this pitch to land all the time, and it works against AAA hitters. It doesn't work against big league hitters. They just lay off of it. So he made a change to his breaking ball by the end of the year where he was throwing it harder, firmer, less sweep on it, and it looked like it made a big difference in terms of how he could command that pitch specifically. And I think that'll go a really long way for him. I thought that was a great change that he made. It's just a matter of, can we get the rest of the stuff to follow suit and be thrown where he wants it to be more consistently? But I still think Craig Yoho is going to play a role on this 2026 team, probably a much bigger role than he played at any point last year. We will see him in the big league bullpen and probably with better results. I think back to when Devin Williams debuted for the Brewers, and he was giving up some homers. He was struggling a little bit at the big league level. It wasn't bad by any means. And if you take out the one White Sox game where Yoho really, it ended up just kind of snowballing on him, most of what he did at the big league level was fine. It was similar to what Devin Williams had. But I think back to that, and it's just such a similar situation with how the fastball and the changeup both play. Yoho has better, well, he has breaking stuff. He has something going to his glove side that's actually a pretty good pitch on its own. Unless the command just never comes around, and reminding people that he flew through the minors, but he was very new to pitching relatively because he had barely pitched in college. And even when he had, it had been really limited, and it had been his last season. So yeah, there's still quite a bit to like here with Yoho, but the command just has to be a bit better. And I do think, like I said, he's kind of making some changes to the way his stuff plays to try and help get to that more consistently. But watching him in AAA and then obviously seeing what he did at the big league level, Joseph, is there anything outside of that you think maybe he could work on, or something you caught your eye as something that he needs to improve upon?
No, I mean, it is that command, and I think honestly, it's not just command, it's belief that his stuff will play with command at the major league level. And he's 26. Yeah, he's 26 until October. So I think it was also, I really think it was a case too where a manager lost faith in the player. And so even though I felt he was absurdly deserving of another call up by the end of the year, like he had added the wrinkles he talked about, he looked more impactful with those wrinkles. It felt like the writing had been on the wall, that Murphy had seen enough of him. He didn't have faith that it was going to play, and he had his guys. And that's okay. Managers do that. But I would be shocked if he's not given a meaningful opportunity to carve out a role on the Brewers staff this season. And I would be utterly unsurprised if it's right out of spring training, like right into the bullpen. You know, if those changes stick and he's, worked on his belief and has a good spring training, I think it's a surefire bet he's in the bullpen. I really do. Because his stuff is good. Like, it's going to play, I think. He just has to get in the zone, and he has to trust it. And to your point, he's just inexperienced, Like, he had all those injuries in college, shifted to pitching. This was all new. His ascent was unbelievable. But, yeah, I mean, he hit a bump in the road. No big deal. I have no doubt he'll be back.
Agreed. Absolutely agree on that. The final guy we'll talk about here is Blake Holub. This is another guy who, when he was in Double-A, 2024 was interesting because he would dominate Double-A, and then he'd go back to Triple-A, struggle, dominate Double-A after going back down, struggle in Triple-A. He showed some good things in 2025 at the Triple-A level, but he is a guy who just, the stuff is absolutely there. He's got like a nice cut ride fastball that is actually, honestly, almost an outlier for anybody, even at the big league level, with the velo that he throws it at and the movement he gets. It's an interesting pitch. It's very over the top. It's an outlier type pitch. The breaking ball is a pretty good pitch as well. They don't have him throw the splitter much, but he's shown some flashes with the splitter at times. I wish he would throw it a little bit more, but given he is already dealing with command issues, the splitter is arguably the most difficult pitch to command. So I get why they might not be thrilled about throwing that into the equation all the time. But it's a funky delivery. It's good stuff. He's just got to throw more strikes, and it's a major league quality arm. He was a guy that if they were going to protect anybody from the Rule 5 that was eligible, I thought he was someone that might get snagged by somebody just because they would see him as this interesting, weird arm with good stuff, and maybe they just could find one tweak and get him in the zone enough to be a big league reliever right away. But he is a guy that it feels like it's just that. If he could have, I mean, he's a lot older than Miz, but if he can find that, like, okay, I just figured out my mechanics enough where I can be in the zone consistently, I don't think he's going to have too many issues getting outs against good hitters. But if you're spraying it all around and then the pitches that you do throw in the zone end up over the middle, then things can be difficult. And that was kind of the trouble he'd run into from time to time. But what do you see from Holub when you watch him?
Yeah, man, I really like Blake Holub. Shout out Mark Conha, good trade, as we talked about earlier today. Yeah, he's got a really, it's like almost 12 o'clock, that arm, and it's a violent delivery. Like, and so Blake Holub to me is the reliever universe that Ryan Burchard is for me as a starter. I love both of them, and both of them absolutely just need to fine tune their edge work. Like, it's really all it is. I mean, if you look at Holub's work, he's striking out more than a guy in inning at AAA. Like, that's no doubt. But if you take the fact that he walked 31 in like 41 innings, if you knock that 31 walks down to say 15, he's striking out probably 60 some. And so now you're looking at a guy who's almost approaching 2 Ks an inning. That's valuable at any level, obviously. And so his heater is filthy when it's getting swings and misses. But to your point, man, you just really don't know which version you're going to get inning to inning. And that's why he's not gotten a chance at the major league level. But, man, if he could just – because last year was a big improvement in that department. At AAA, it was significant. Like, he kept the ERA in a manageable, but his WHIP, was still like 1.55. Like, so got to knock that down. Like, if you could just get it down to like 1.25 in his role, that'll play, because he's going to be striking out a lot of guys. Like, I have no doubts if he gets his stuff in the zone, he'll strike out major league hitters. Like, it's that good, because if he can. With the way his run works on his heater and the way guys don't seem to see it well, he can just sneak that, he'll sneak that breaker in any count. And then you're a weapon. So it's literally just, but man, that's a big, because he hasn't still put it all together. So, man, but I'm going to definitely be paying attention in 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that will wrap up the sounds portion of this. Hopefully you've enjoyed all of the 5 breakdowns on all of these teams, but we do have quite a few questions that, as I mentioned, we were planning to get to, and we figured this would be the best one to do it, because while we still took over an hour and a half to get through that was much less than we have taken on all of the others. So that still leaves us quite a bit more time than the rest of them have. And that'll take us right into a bunch of questions, and I wanted to start with an interesting one we got from Beater GB asking just about us and kind of how we got into this. So his question is, for both of you, what is your baseball background and how did you get into this prospect/minor league evaluation part of your life? I know, Spencer, you're a baseball coach. Did you play, etc.? Joseph, as a humble farmer, did you play, and how did you learn how to analyze these young kids? So Joseph, why don't you take that one first?
It's a great question. Hilariously, I actually played travel baseball in my youth, and I'm almost 50, so that was years, like a lifetime ago. And hilariously, the last level of baseball I ever played in, my only hit in the entire season was legging out an infield single. It was monumental, big time. So don't ever listen to me talk about hitters. And when I do, I but I played college athletics. I was on scholarship in college. I was a goalkeeper in soccer. But I knew, I knew at a young age, at that point, I just knew it wasn't for me. Like when I say there are levels to levels, I saw some of those levels. And, had I gone the route I wanted, that my parents, for instance, wanted for me at that, I definitely would have gone pro. Like that option was on the table, but it wasn't in my makeup. I knew it, and it wasn't something I was very serious about. But what I did learn to do, because I played with such elite athletes, I personally learned how to see how athletes move. And that translates across any sport. And, certain sports, athletes are twitchier. That's not debatable in my eyes, having been in, I used to walk the halls at Indiana University, and at that point in time, Andre Patterson, if you remember that name, he was a power forward in the NBA. I cannot begin to. I'm 6'3", about 235. This man was a giant, and it was at that point in time I realized that a 6'9", 280-pound professional athlete is a different creature, and yet moved like a gazelle to my eyes. But anyhow, I've had family members play professional basketball. I've had family members that coach at the professional level. And so athletics has always been in our family conversations. And so I've been around it a lot. And so I just enjoy baseball the most out of any sport, just because in my mind, it's a headier game. There's chess moves that are, going on in terms of strategy. It's just such a fascinating thing. And I'm a little bit ADHD. Like, I have a ton of seeds I work with on the farm, and I like compartmentalizing the names and the varieties and this and that. And so it's a natural attraction for me to be obsessed about hundreds of names and players. It's entertaining. And the draft process and the prospect process of baseball, to me, it's just like light years more involved and more entertaining, more moving parts than any other level of any sport. And so that's ultimately what drew me in. And I have been reading Jim Goulart for almost since the beginning of Brewer Fan. And so when COVID hit, I just reached out and threw my name in the ring. And it just so happened that that's how I got into kind of like getting more seriously involved in the forum and in the reports. I do want to say, though, that I will not be writing reports this year because of my farm work. It's gotten to the point now where I actually have businesses, and I'm stepping out into my region as somebody who breeds seeds and perennial fruiting plants and annuals, and I've got too much to do. So fortunately for my family, honestly, but unfortunately for my my hobby and leisure enjoyment, I'm going to be watching less. I'm going to be, I just don't have the time for it. But that's, long-winded way of saying that's how I got into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I did play. I played through college. I played at the college that I currently coach at as a two-way player. It was very early in my life that baseball became like just a huge deal for me, and something that I was going to be spending a lot of my time on moving forward. Ironically enough, or funny enough, the very first Brewer game I remember attending is actually the Sean Green 4-homer game. I was only 3 years old at the time, but I remember going to the game, and I remember it being a huge deal that, somebody hit 4 homers in a game. And that was like that's my main first memory for the Brewers, which given what would happen the next, 7 or so years, like that was a pretty good introduction to what I was going to have to get used to for a little while as a kid. But baseball became like everything to me as I started watching the Brewers. And even when I was a kid, like I had a weird, I think most kids probably go to a game and they want to see homers. They want to see all this stuff. And I went to games and I like wanted to watch JJ Hardy and try and do what he was doing when I played shortstop. And like from that moment, like I always just wanted to watch it from a little bit of a different point of view, even as a kid. And then as I got a little bit older, got into high school, I became really interested in how the general flow of the front office and how all of that works and just how baseball is viewed like from the ground up for an organization. Started going to some Timber Rattler games when I had the opportunity to. And then once MILB TV came around while I was kind of at the edge of high school and college, I got a subscription and I just started watching games. And at that point, it was just watching games to watch more baseball. I wasn't like taking close notes or doing any of that stuff, but I was very interested in the minor league side of things. And then when I was in college, it was Brewer Fanatic that really I found the site at that time. It was, just Brewer Fan at that time. And I found the site and I started following along, started like, okay, I'm going to do my own prospect rankings now that they're putting these out there and doing that and really starting to dig into it from a deeper level. And then, once I got out of college and I actually had, a little more time on my hands to really nerd out about it, I started diving into it at probably a level that most people would tell me is not healthy or great for me, but a level that I really enjoy. So it's just something that, baseball is genuinely outside of family and friends and everything else. Like it's probably that next most important part of my life for me. It means a ton to me that the fact that I get to still coach at the college level, like that is a blessing that I am so happy to have every time, even though there are times where you get a little baseballed out, but even then, like I don't really, I can watch it, I can follow it, I can do anything with it at any time, any day, and still be completely enamored with what's going on the field at pretty much any level. So it's something that I just really, really have always enjoyed. And then I got to the point where when I was coaching, I was starting to learn more about scouting too, just from that level. I think I always had a pretty good eye. That's why I was given the opportunity to coach right out of college. But yeah, it's just something that I just really, really enjoy the sport. I enjoy the minor leagues. I enjoy the development portion of baseball, especially. And so that drew me to the minor leagues, I think, kind of naturally. But yeah, it's not something I plan on stopping anytime soon. In fact, it's probably getting even less healthy for me in other people's eyes. So we'll keep going until apparently it becomes too big of an issue. But we're gonna keep going with it for now. But that can take us into, we got a bunch of questions. I tried to like keep these together in terms of what they're discussing, because we got a lot of questions that are similar, at least focus on similar topics. So we got quite a few questions regarding just promotions in general. So Ostentatious asked, looking at the Pirates reportedly moving up Connor Griffin as a teenager, meaning he's got a chance to make the big league roster out of spring here. How do you feel about the Brewers' extremely disciplined approach to promotions? They can be aggressive, but it follows a pattern and looks very well thought out. Major league team could use some juice at some spots, but the brass knows a guy like Pratt or Amade aren't ready to be force-fed. So, yeah, I think they're a pretty aggressive team generally. I think in season they've become a little bit less aggressive, but even when it is, if it's a Connor Griffin level guy, they're not going to be afraid to push him. They've done it with Churio. They're doing it with Made. I think it's the guys that you don't want to be the Angels. You don't want to be the team that's just forcing talented but not ready guys to move through the org. I would even say the Padres probably qualify for that same type of thing. Like Ethan Salas had no business moving as quickly as he did, and I think they really stunted his development by doing what they did. So, yeah, I would say following a pattern and being very well thought out, that part I would say for sure. Like I think they they know what they're doing in that regard. And even when they aren't promoting somebody that I'm like, I feel like seems like they should be getting a chance, I feel pretty comfortable saying, but I also trust what the Brewers are doing here. Like, I don't really doubt that they have the right thing in mind for the player and for the org. But Joseph, in terms of like how they do these promotions, is this, I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think actually they've gotten a little more dialed in with how they do it in that, like if they know if they have an elite of an elite guy, they're going to move him fast. And they do it because they get to higher levels and they just ball out. So there's really no concerns. Like, Churio, at AA, of course, the puppy is now waking up. This is great. He stayed a little longer in AA, I think, than we all would like him to have, but he still got to the major league level at a very, very young age. And so, but with all the other guys, like, I feel like they just have the pulse on how and when they're going to move them. And there's always a rationale that you can understand. Like, would I have wanted Josh Adamshevsky at a higher level sooner? Yes. However, it's very understandable. He was injured with some freakish injuries, and also there's a logjam at several positions. And did I want him in left field sooner? Yes. But they put him in left field, and he spent all the AFL in left field. So clearly they know what they're doing. If anything, what I have learned over the years with the Brewers is to just relax and let it play out. Like, really. And I just don't get worked up anymore, because typically when I do, I'm wrong. And so I just leave it to the experts.
Yeah. Do Wizard asked, any guys you think could be a surprise add to the 40-man or make the roster out of camp, maybe get a shot later in the season? He listed Freddie Zamora, Ethan Murray, Eduardo Garcia, etc. as options for that. My thought would be, I guess, not really. I look at some of the minor league signings that they've made, and I say those guys could be, if you're not paying close attention to who they're signing, like, I could see them all of a sudden being in the big leagues and people going, who's pitching right now or who's about to hit? Like Gerson Garabito and Jacob Wagasback. Like, those are two guys that stand out as pretty interesting arms that I think there's a pretty good chance we'll see in the big leagues at some level. But of people in the org who would fit that bill, I could see some prospects like Luis Lara ending up forcing his way up to the big leagues if center fielders aren't performing well. I could see a guy like Tyson Harden forcing his way into the big leagues on the mound in some capacity because the stuff is just too good. Like, those types of things. But in terms of like those off the radar, kind of the minor league depth guys, I don't know that there are any super clear options for me that I would point out. But we'll see some people that we're not expecting to see at some point. That just happens pretty much every year. Do Wizard also asked, if Vaughn and or Bowers suck, do you see Luke Adams getting a shot? So if Adams starts in Nashville and he performs and both of them suck, then I think he'd be somebody that you could end up seeing getting an opportunity. But at the same time, I think they would probably try going somewhere else before they go to Luke Adams as like that first option behind Vaughn and Bowers. Maybe that's a different option in the system, but I think it might be like they try and find somebody else from outside the system first. Or, you pick up another Bobby Delbeck type during the season and he gets that chance first or something. But I wouldn't rule out Adams at any point in 2026, but I think it would probably have to come down to that first. Is that how you would look at it too? We're talking about the Vaughn and Bowers question we got from Do Wizard.
Can you repeat I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
Yeah. If Vaughn and or Bowers struggle this year, do you see Luke Adams getting a shot?
No. And I love Luke Adams. I think in a perfect world for Luke Adams in 2026, he's ending the season in AAA. That's what I think. He's still very young, very young. missed a bunch of time last year to injury. I just feel like more time at first base. And I mean, man, I'm a really big Blake Burke believer. So I like Blake Burke more than most, I think. And I like Luke Adams a lot, but I just think like there's no need. And I think, Vaughn is their guy, sink or swim this year. And I think they're gonna run with him, and even through some rough stretches. I don't think they're gonna have any qualms with doing that. And I think they've shown they love Jake Bauers. And Jake Bauers, I mean, goodness, if you remember, he was one of the best hitters for the Brewers in the postseason. That's a big deal. He's super versatile, better than most people give him credit for. My gosh, I love Jake Bauers as a player. I think he's very good. And so, yeah, I just don't think there's a need. We don't need to rush him. Like, let's let him get some more seasoning. Let's see if he can access his power more, work on his tendency to pop up the ball, get less of that in his makeup, and get ready for a meaningful shot in 2027. That's how I personally see it.
Yeah.
And I missed the question before.
Kind of.
Was the question before about
that was any surprises on the 40-man or making the team at some point? I said Jeferson Quero and Jacob Waguespack as two guys that I could see being up at some point. They asked about Zamora, Murray, and Garcia. My thought was most of the surprises I could see are the minor league signings rather than guys who are currently in the organization.
Yeah, and I think if Holub actually made a stride, I think he could potentially get a shot. Like, he's got that good of stuff. But to me, not really beyond that. And more than anything, I think what we might see, that's a flavor of what you're asking, is I think you may see some guys that move faster and achieve levels faster than you would think. And my prime guy for that is if Jason Woodward comes back healthy, look out. Because I'm going to tell you, his raw stuff is as good at any pitcher in the system. Any. And so if he's finally healthy, man, I really hope he is. He could really surprise. And the other guy is Manuel Rodriguez. If he comes back with actually a velo bump, look out. Because that's going to change everything. So those are the two guys for me.
Yeah, Woodward, I have been envisioning that Logan Henderson just sprint through the system if he comes back healthy, where it was just high A. Okay, too good for high A. Double A for a while, too good for double A. We got to get him to triple A and then finish the season there. I could absolutely see that.
And I got to think he's an arm they want to get to triple A because of his clock and his, if he's healthy, I think they're going to just move him. His stuff is so good. I cannot impart to people who have not seen him pitch. When I saw him pitch, for that little time we saw, I was absolutely jaw-dropping. Like, what kind of demon did we get here? So he's like, I cannot wait to see him pitch an inning again. I really cannot. And I hope I just hope that it's like a semblance of what we saw.
Yeah, I agree. Ostentatious kind of asked any, Wilkin, Lara, anyone else you see jumping to Milwaukee this year, especially in the position player ranks. I think those two are possible, realistic that could happen. I would throw Cooper Pratt out there as a very realistic possibility as well. And then, I do think Burke is a good guy to call out as someone, if he hits and they do struggle at first or there's injuries at first, like I could see that happening. I think Quero's not really counting in that. And then the one other name is, I will not rule out Jesus Mate making it to the big leagues next year. I won't do it. Same for you.
Oh yeah. Okay. To the gills. I mean, man, if Mate comes back and he's hitting like he was hitting and he's got an off season to put a little more, I mean, he was already pretty chiseled. Like, man, that is just a player. I pretty much dream on what Jesus Mate might look like in 2026, like once a week. I'm just like, man, what is Mate doing in the offseason? I cannot, I just can't. It's really hard to describe the electricity factor that had elevated by the end of the season and the belief factor in what we had with that level of talent. And I have no qualms saying it. Like, if things come to fruition, he is a better overall talent than Churio, just because of the premium position and his ability to move all over the infield and switch hit power to all fields. Like, woo. And that's saying a lot, but I say it pretty confidently. And that's just, and the addendum there is if he reaches his potential.
Yes. Yep. 100% with you on that. Ostentatious also asked, he said, I'd love to see Fisher, Mate, and Pratt move up to Milwaukee by 2027. How do you see that, and how would you handle the awkward timing regarding our prospects and readiness for 2026? Seems like there's a gap on the left side of the infield, but maybe only for a year since we hope the cavalry is coming. I feel like they could make a 1 to 2 year move on a shortstop or third base to bridge the gap. So this was a question from way before when we started doing the series. I think we all know that there's really not going to be any move that fills that gap. And I don't really think there needs to be either. I think they'll be totally fine with what they have currently at the big league level, especially because I do believe that the cavalry is coming in 2027, like you said. As for the question on how all three of those fit, I do think that could be a bit difficult unless you trade Terang. But you could also have Fisher at first base. So Pratt and Mate could be your left side of the infield, whichever one is at whichever spot, and Fisher's at third or at first. And then if you did happen to move Terang, I don't know that that would be the best move for 2027 because I believe he would still have one more year after that. At 2028 is his last year of control, if I remember correctly. Then you could put Fisher at third and your middles could be Mate and Pratt. But I think that's the only way it really works out. And obviously you could also do some platooning with Fisher and Pratt potentially at third or something, and then DHing Fisher at times, playing him at first at times. Like, you can move guys around and make it work. I think there's also a world where Pratt is a utility guy at the big league level, and that's kind of the role he fills at that level anyway. And then Mate's your main guy, and Fisher's your third baseman. Like, there's a lot of things that can work out. I know people love these talks, and I get why people are very enthusiastic and enjoy like looking ahead to the lineups, but it is the most like, just find it hard to actually do it when it comes up because there's so many things that are going to happen before then. There are going to be injuries. There are going to be people who are just not ready. They aren't good enough to play at the big league level. Like, it's a fun thing to look at, but I just always struggle to give good answer because in my head, I just come up with all the reasons. Like, it's probably not actually going to play out how we want it to. But Joseph, is that kind of what you're looking at too, or how maybe any other ideas you've got for how they could make that work?
Yeah, honestly, I spent so little time thinking about it in that way. These are good problems to have. And they're not really problems. It's like they have depth at positions of need and in important positions. And I mean, apparently the industry thinks that Andrew Fisher is the best third base prospect in baseball because everyone else is shortstop. So it'll figure itself out. And the other thing to add there is inevitably there will be trades. There will be trades. And the only person in the Brewers system that I see as untouchable is Mate. Like, that's it. And then everyone else to me is on the table if the right deal comes along and it gives them an area of need, gives them a player that they need for a postseason push. I just don't think they would think twice to do that. Do I think it's probable? No, not really, but it's certainly on the table. And so we'll see. I've thought that Tyler Black might be traded for the last 2 years and he's still in the org. So, there's so many moving parts and I just let it play out. I just want to see these guys have healthy seasons. And that's really my baseline. Like, can they stay healthy and get at bats, get, reps in the infield, get innings? To me, that's the biggest thing. And it's really hard to make it through a baseball season healthy. They play a lot of innings in a young body for a lot of them. This is their first time playing this amount of baseball. They're traveling. It's just so many moving parts just within a season that I never leap forward and I just don't prognosticate the rosters because it just tends to figure itself out.
Yep, with you on that for sure. So now we've got a group of more big league focused questions, which we normally wouldn't talk about at any point, but we got some that are kind of tied to the farm system. So Ostentatious asked, or he said a lot of people harp on us having outfield depth. And again, this happened well before all of these minor league signings happened and everything else. But he said, I actually am thinking the opposite. Could see us making a sneaky move here to acquire an outfielder. If we knew Mitchell would put in a full season, I might feel differently. I like Lara in a year or so, but I'm not sure he's an everyday starter. Josh Adamszewski can be great, but still speculative. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's I was wondering if they would add to the outfield this offseason too, but I kind of felt like they were going to just go with what they did, and Jack and I talked about that a lot. So if you listen to those, we've covered that quite a few times, so we'll probably move past that a little bit. But in terms of the second question you asked with, what are your thoughts on Garrett Mitchell? You said this guy looks like a freaking Adonis. He's got the swing and miss problem, but to me, he could be a major talent on the level of Duran in Boston. But I think it would be insane to count on him at the same time. So, yeah, I think they're going to give him that shot as the center fielder again this year. I do think that the swing and miss is – I just don't buy that it's going to work at the big league level, personally. I just don't really believe that it's going to work. I hope it does. It would be great if it does. If he hits, he's going and he stays healthy, Mitchell will be a big leaguer that helps the Brewers quite a bit. But I really struggle to buy that the bat's going to play. And I don't really think it's even reasonable at this point to assume that he's going to have a healthy season at any point in the near future. So that's where I'm at. I do think like the ceiling is a Duran type with better defense in center field. I think that's a reasonable comp as to what he could be offensively if things click, but we will see. I think that fastball at the top of the zone is still such a hole for him. We were already seeing it in smaller samples that it was starting to get exposed. He hasn't had the chance to really show it get exposed, and a lot of the luck has been on his side in small samples, but we will see. Hopefully we get the chance. I'd love to find out for sure this season if we have something in Mitchell that's a big league starting center fielder, but I'm not feeling great about the odds of that. Joseph, kind of what are your thoughts on Mitchell heading into this season?
I like Garrett Mitchell, but he's injured all the time, unfortunately. And honestly, I don't know. I wonder if his pre-existing health condition plays into that. Like, now the shoulder thing, that was just freakish, but he's pretty much going back to his minor league days. He's pretty much been injured almost every season. And so it's just, I don't really have expectations for Garrett Mitchell other than what you're speaking to there is, can he stay healthy ever for a season? And I think that the approach to make that happen has to be a heavy, heavy platoon. I just don't think he can take the wear and tear. So, I see him as like a fourth, fifth outfielder guy at this point, just because of that. But man, such a premium athlete for his size and how he can move. Those holes in his swing they've always been there. And that's a legitimate concern. And to your point, we haven't seen him swing the bat enough. And I think that fans they get caught up in those moments that he's had, which have been great. I'm not going to deny that, but man, I just don't think you can depend on anything. He's an X factor, but he's also, the Brewers have proven already, they don't need Garrett Mitchell on the baseball field to win baseball games.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I end when I think about Garrett Mitchell.
Closet Brewer fan asked, what corrections does Ortiz need to make to at least replicate his batting line from 2024? What's the likelihood that he can do it? I hear people saying that we have Pratt available if Ortiz fails. Is Pratt a better prospect than what Ortiz was when he was on the top 100? I'm willing to give Ortiz another shot, as he should be a very good shortstop, or he could be a very good shortstop, but just not sure if that ship has sailed already or not. So to answer is Pratt a better prospect than Ortiz was, I would say they're actually very similar in a lot of what you see. However, Pratt is multiple years younger than Ortiz was at the same point in his progression on the top 100 and in the minor league system. So I think that plays a role. I think there's more room for Pratt to grow. But for me, Ortiz has to clean up the swing decisions, find a comfortable swing, and work on his timing. I mean, that's really the extent of pretty much everything that has gone poorly for him the last couple of years. Is most of it's tied to timing. He just hasn't been on time. And that can be related to swing decisions. If you're making last second, if you're just not making good swing decisions, your timing can be off because they work together a little bit. So I don't even think he needs to get to what he showed his first year to be a very valuable player. If he's like a 90 WRC plus guy with really good defense at short, that's probably almost a 3-win player. And it's hard to ask for much more from anybody. Obviously, in an ideal world, you get more than that. But like, if he's even just like within 10% of league average, which he's capable of, he's able to do that. It'll be hard to complain about what you're getting from him. And then you will have Mate and Pratt waiting in the wings for the next year. And I think that's a good place to be in personally. But Joseph, thoughts on Ortiz or anything in terms of how shortstop will be handled this year?
I mean, we haven't even talked about Jet Williams. So I think he's the likely first in line. I mean, they said they're going to give him heavy shortstop in terms of if, Joey should scuffle. But, the timing is well known. Like his timing was so off this past season. And really for him, it's like you see a player that's not trusting what he's seeing. Like when you're making those types of swing decisions that he was making and then just not swinging at very hittable pitches over the heart of the plate, there's just something going on up here during the season where you're just not calibrated. And so I think if there was any player that needed an off-season reset, obviously it was Joey Ortiz. And so I think they're going to give him every opportunity to keep on playing that lights out Gold Glove caliber defense at short and just hope they can get a modicum of timing back and just swing at hittable pitches. Just start there. I mean, really.
Yeah. Yep. I think that is very fair. That can take us, because you mentioned, earlier we talked about some trading is going to come down the line at some point. We got a bunch of questions related to that. Some of these are, like I've mentioned, a little bit dated now because we kind of know how the offseason went, and some of them were kind of in regards to this one. So I may kind of skip past a few of them, but KXM asked, as it appears we're beginning to see the team stack waves of minor league players, Milwaukee may be in position to start trading major league players with 2+ years left in the near future to increase the minor league talent pool as replacement talent comes up. 1, which minor league players that are Rule 5 eligible next year do you expect to be trade bait? 2, what does the ideal 2027-2028 team look like today? And 3, which of the major league players become the best to trade early? So example, Terang's value in the trade market compared to options we have to replace him. So we probably won't touch too much on how the 27-28 team looks because that's just, there's a lot to dive into there. And like we said, that can be tough to really even look that far out and say anything on it. But I tried to find kind of the Rule 5 guys who are eligible next offseason. And I do think they're going to have some guys who they probably are willing to move and would make sense to move them. Mike Bovey being one of them. Dylan O'Ray being another. Wilkin will be on the list, and depending on how everything else is shaking out, Wilkin could be somebody that they view as one of their better chips to move if they make a move. Like I could see that playing out that way if they look at it and they go, okay, third and first both look like they're going to be pretty full. Wilkins having a good year in AAA, capitalize, try and turn him into an outfielder with control or a pitcher with some control or something that they, feel is a better use for him. So he's somebody that I could see making some sense there. And then, for the last part, assuming you're talking about trading them before their final season, like Terang would be 2 years out next offseason, when I look at the roster, I think he's kind of the only one who would make any sense in that regard. I don't really think Frelick's ever going to be someone who carries a ton of trade value. I do think Turang could, if he really shows the power over the course of a season. So he'd probably be my answer for that. But a lot in that question, Joseph. Anything you'd like to touch on in terms of the Rule 5 guys they might move, or maybe the major league players that would make some sense to trade a little bit earlier than just 1 year prior to their final offseason as Brewers, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think I have much more to add there, and it's mainly just due to the fact that it's not really. They're in-depth questions and they're valid questions, but it's really not how I tend to think about the system or the players. But yeah, to your point, I think Turang, he offers such immense value as it is. But man, the Brewers have stuck with Turang through and through. He's been one of their core prospects for a long time. He's doing it at the major league level. He's offering Gold Glove defense. He's tapping into a little bit of power every level that he's gone to, and he's taken the work to get better. He's gotten better, including at the major league level. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that hard to fathom that he just stays aboard as a veteran leader in that clubhouse either. And they go from the minor league pool to augment elsewhere, because they've shown time and again they can certainly add more talent to the minor league pool too in many different ways. I think the bigger question I have, period, about the minor leagues in general, and very much including the Brewers, especially with their recent trend, is, are they really going to prevent teams from drafting high school players? Like, really? Come on, man. Like that. It just seems like every advantage the Brewers come up with in their small market restriction capacity, like they've already made all the scouting data across minor leagues uniform and universal, which, okay, all right, I guess you're going to reward everyone for not learning how to do that as well as some of the teams. Great. And now they're threatening to remove high school eligibility. To me, that's just nonsense. It's just like, but I would not put it past the major league's abilities to just destroy something really good too. So it is what it is, if it is what it is.
Yeah. I am not a fan of that idea. I'm really hoping that does not wind up coming to fruition. It's just not. We got to question a little bit about how the development differs from college and the pros, and we can touch on that a little bit later too. But that does lead us into the draft questions that we got, mostly related to this most recent draft, but also some like overarching ones. So 2025 draft, Beater GB asks, which of the high school arms has the best upside, and scouting reports on the late high school arms in Luke Roop, Chase Bentley, and Mikhail Holden, particularly since no one thought Holden or Bentley would sign, which is correct at the time. Did not expect either of them to sign as 19th and 20th round picks. Signed them both. Very interesting and fun arms. Starting with Holden, he is a guy who was a two-way in high school. He was going to be a two-way at Alabama. Really good athlete, big dude with some pop at the plate. But he's been up to 97 on the fastball. Throws a curveball and a slider. Pretty fun-looking changeup as well. Kind of sits more in high school. He sat more in like that 91, 93 range, but he got up to 97, like I said. So he's an interesting one for sure. Just a really good athlete on the mound who probably has some room to grow in terms of mechanics. So could be some low-hanging fruit for even more velocity for a guy like that. Chase Bentley, IMG Academy guy. Really, really good season for them. He kind of tops out at like that 93 range. Right now, really, really good changeup as his best secondary. Fastball has a good shape to it. Gives me a little bit of like the Tyler Renz vibes from a few years ago with that pick, except Renz didn't really have a changeup. He had more breaking ball stuff. Bentley does have a sweeper and a curveball. Both are probably average or fringe average, unless he tweaks some of the movement and starts throwing them a little bit harder. But really good command for a high schooler. Good fastball shape, good changeup. That's a fun place to start from. And with his body, he's a pretty big dude. I think there's going to be more velo in the tank for him too. And then Luke Roop. This is a guy who just has like solid pitches across the board, really knows how to pitch, a little bit older for a high schooler. maybe more in like that Tobias Griffin type of mold. But he's got the fastball, curveball, sweeper, changeup, all of them solid. Command's good, but like I said, a little bit older. Probably not a ton of development left in terms of velo, unless, I mean, you never know, but just based on how he's kind of already filled out and just looking at him, I don't think there's going to be a ton more in the tank, but he can get into that 94, 95 range at times. So an interesting arm there as well. I will let you answer the other part in a second here, but my answer to the high school arms with the best upside, I think, is pretty obvious. It is Frank Chiron if he's back to where he was eventually. And then the other one is Josh Flores. Flores is kind of the high school version of Miz, not with the exact same body type and the lankiness and everything else, but it is nasty breaking balls, pretty big velo already up to 97, and pretty good shape to the fastball as well. Like there's a ton to like there. The changeup he's even thrown a little bit more than Miz probably had at this part of his career too. I think Flores is going to be the most interesting guy for me to watch this year. I just want to see if he's throwing strikes. If he is, he's probably going to be a guy that can move up lists really quickly because the stuff is genuinely, it's 3,000 RPM breaking balls with big time late break. And like I said, that fastball shape's good. But he walked almost a batter an inning in high school this year. So the command is going to be a very, very big question. But watching that develop, I think the pure ceiling is as high as anybody's. But for you, Joseph, among those guys, is there anyone else that I didn't touch on there in the high school arms that you like? Or honestly, we got questions on the really just the general pitchers that were drafted. So if you want to hit on JD Thompson, any of those guys, like anybody from the draft that you really liked on the pitching side.
Whew. Yeah, I mean, my favorite guy was Chiron, and so man, just to see him healthy is like, oh, thank goodness. And that had lost importance very obviously. But the fact that he's somewhat in the early stages of coming back is like, oh man, that's pretty great. I just hope that it's a smooth recovery road from here. I think the stuff we were seeing out of Arizona on JD Thompson really intrigues me. It was almost as if my own thoughts on JD Thompson were inaccurate. And so I was like, huh, really? I've always seen him as a changeup first guy, but the data coming out of there was his curveball, right? Like it was just like, okay, cool, let's see it. I remember after the draft, there were really good things coming out about Holden in terms of where we got him and what might be there. But beyond that, yeah, I think Flores is really, really intriguing. But I think beyond that, what's the most exciting about all of it is just the insane amount of intrigue they have in a vast pool of 18 to 21-year-old arms. It's like there is so much interesting going on, and it's going on in so many different directions. Like you've got like super intriguing, super low velo guys like Melvin Hernandez that are like the size of a bottle of beer, but man, just knows how to pitch. And you wonder on that. And then like Akara down who's going to be at Wilson. Like I love his stuff. And that doesn't even get into it really at all. I just think that the depth they have in that age group, I would think you would be hard pressed to find any other team in baseball with that pool of unknown upside. I mean, that doesn't even get into Ethan Dortche's, and what they were saying about him out of Arizona. I mean, Dubanowitz, like, geez, we can dream on just so many arms down there. And of course, this new pool of young arms as well. And hopefully we'll get an opportunity to see them on video a handful of times down in Wilson. Inevitably, one or two of those arms will make their way at some point in the season. And I don't think at this point we know who those are going to be. And then again, the injury thing always comes into play. Who's going to come in healthy? Are they all healthy? We think they are, but then who's going to inevitably get something going on in spring training where they have to sit out. Who's going to start in Arizona? Are they going to leapfrog anybody to Wilson right away, which they might, yeah, there's so much there.
Yeah, there is. We got a question from Peter GB kind of asking about where we expect them to end up on the pitching side. So for me, I do think JD Thompson has a pretty good chance to start in high A. I would not be surprised at all if that happens. I think that's probably where I'm leaning. Jacob Morrison, the pick out of Coastal Carolina, I think he's for sure in full season ball. Depending how it lines up, I wouldn't also be shocked to see him in high A. He's pretty advanced. There's probably not a ton. I would guess probably low A for him, though. Chiron, we've obviously talked about. Healy, he asked about as well. I think he's a low A guy to start. And then Flores, he also asked about. And I would say, I'm guessing he's complex league to start the year. But probably at some point we see him in low A, unless he comes into spring and the command's way better than expected. I think that's the one thing that could swing him into low A earlier than I'm expecting right now. If we do see him start there, I think that's a really good sign for where the command was in spring. So we may not get a chance to see him, but I think that'd be a pretty good, if we're reading tea leaves, I think that would be a good one to read if he ends up in low A, that they're very happy with where the command came in. We also got a question from Daniel about a couple of late round picks, or a late round pick and 2 non-drafted free agents. He said, any particular excitement about Rylan Mills, Malachi Halterman, or Nick Monile? And the last 2 of those are being non-drafted free agents. I know we've heard already from Todd Johnson that they're pretty excited about Rylan Mills and what they were hearing in terms of the defense, because the bat is what they drafted him for. And they heard really good things from Instructs regarding the defense at the catcher spot. So that's a really good sign for kind of where he's going right now. Halterman he played everywhere in high school. He played every single spot, basically. He has been catching in pro ball, at least to begin his career. That's interesting to me. Very good athlete back there. He was in the 90s a little bit when he was on the mound. Not the biggest dude, but just a really good athlete who just seems like a ball player. So he'll be fun. The one I know the least about is Monal. I know he's a very, very good defender. But I don't know a ton about the bat. I don't know. I mean, that one came a little bit out of nowhere as a later non-drafted signing. But yeah, that's kind of what we know about them. Anything else you want to add on that, Joseph?
No, but going back to the pitchers, do we know the health status of Episcope?
Right now, I believe what we had heard last is that he's throwing, but he's not going to be ready for the start of the season. I think on Fanatic, actually, A-Rob's Brew Crew they're kind of looking at midseason is when we're hoping to see him.
Okay, because that's a pretty interesting wild card arm with electric stuff. So, boy, and we didn't talk about Owens. But yeah, they always have interesting drafts. they just do. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna pivot slightly from that question. Just say one of the players that I'm most interested in seeing is someone we haven't talked about, but we've talked about in other episodes, is Rylan Mills, the catcher. I don't know, I heard some things. I know you heard some things too, but I just think this might be a player that's much better than advertised. And so, we've talked about the catching depth on more than one occasion in separate pods, but to me, that's a big wild card player. And I'm really intrigued by the first look, and I hope it matches what I heard. That's all I'm going to say there.
Yeah. Peter GB, that leads into one of his questions, actually. He asked about the catching depth. He was saying behind Quero and Dingus, it's likely Wood as that next guy, and then which DSL, ACL, low A catcher can be the next in line, basically. And I would say, yes, I think that's pretty much what you're looking at. Those are the top 3. And then you've got the Rylan Mills, the Kevin Garcias. I think Moises, by the middle of the season, I think we're going to be talking about Moises Salazar as one of those prospects to watch, kind of similar to how we saw like a Quero and some of these other guys when they were in the DSL, because I've heard really, really good things about him. I think of the ones we've talked about him a lot, but Ramon Rodriguez is a guy that probably isn't going to be a prospect list guy, but I think could be a big league catcher to some extent. He'd be the other guy I would throw out. But is that kind of how you would look at it as well?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought in Ramon, because we know he's actually, even with the Achilles injury, it seems to be like that grade 2 where he'll be ready, which is exciting. I just love Ramon Rodriguez, you know that. Yeah, but they've got, they love Darian Miller's just org depth, contrary to certain articles. They do love him as org depth. And, David Garcia, org depth guy there too. He can bounce levels. But I think the other guy I'm really interested to see what this year brings for him is Karobo. Mm-hmm. I really want to see, first season stateside, didn't really it seemed like he had an okay season, but he was a guy who calling card his defense. And so I want to just see if another offseason stateside, if he made, any kind of jumps, because he had a pretty interesting pedigree when he first was in the DSL. And so they liked him enough. They brought him into Arizona. So I think that's a guy who could surprise.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good call out. If the bat is there, the defense is going to be there. So it's just a matter of if he hits enough. And I think he's got to rework the swing a little bit from the video I've seen, but the defense is absolutely going to play. Last draft question we got was from SF70. He asked, do you like Matt Arnold's draft strategy of the last 3 years, going under slot early to be able to spend money on high school pitching later? I'll just say the Brewers strategy, because I don't think it's necessarily Matt Arnold's. I think it's the overall group strategy, but I am a very big fan of it. I've made that known quite a few times that I think this is a very good way to attack the draft. And a big part of the reason for that is that it just goes against what other teams are doing, which opens up the pool in a way that other teams aren't. If other teams start to do what the Brewers are trying to do, I bet you'll see the Brewers zag again and go a different direction and try something else. But I'm a big fan of what they're doing right now. And as long as they can continue it, I would like them to continue it. Joseph, are you a fan of how they've been operating these drafts?
Whew. Yeah. I've muted all of my coughs, I think, and could not control the puppy dynamic. You never know. The barks has been at a minimum, so that's nice for the listeners. I think to your point, there was a period of time where, the Brewers aren't drafting high schoolers anymore. I remember that, or just, quite a few, way less high schoolers, and then they just pivoted to drafting almost entirely high schoolers. But yeah, I think that what they've shown is that they will do whatever the group think develops in the off season as they look at players and as they look as how the draft shapes up. But if anything, you can be certain that it will be an entertaining Brewers draft. And I know that it's an acquired taste, but man, I am absolutely a person who watches the draft. And,
yep.
It's not a very exciting experience to some, but man, I just think the baseball draft in particular is just so utterly fascinating, watching these, high school names come off the board, and then you're seeing strategies play out in real time. You're like, oh, that's Ray under slot. Interesting. What are they going to do later? And so I'm sure we have absolutely no idea what they're going to do in this upcoming draft, and that's why I like it. I think it's very entertaining.
Yep. Exactly. 100% agree. All right, we got a bunch of questions about the pitching in the organization. Kind of a quick one here. Beater GB asked, which Milwaukee international free agent pitching prospect makes it to the big leagues next throughout Manuel Rodriguez, Steven Cruz, Jesus Broca? Did he miss anybody? I would say of the group that's most likely to make it, no, that's probably who we're looking at, because those are the ones who have touched AA at some point. For me, I would, of that group, probably actually say Broca. He's been in AA. He's shown a little bit more there. He's also probably a reliever, which makes it a little easier for him to potentially find a role there. He is Rule 5 eligible. this next offseason, which means they'll probably want to see how he does in Double-A. They sent him to the AFL for a reason. He showed really well there. I could see them viewing him, especially with his delivery being kind of similar to him, as like the guy they try to make the next Ashby role out of. They're both like lower extension, over the top, heavy sinker, big breaking ball type guys with pretty decent changeups. Ashby obviously throwing harder than Broca is, but we saw Broca get up to 96 this year. So I think there might be a little more in the tank still moving forward. In terms of being a starter, though, I think Rodriguez is the next guy to have the best chance at that. Is that kind of how you'd look at it? I think Melvin Hernandez is then next in line, but I think he's just so young and a level behind all these guys, and I think he's probably got to be a little further down the list for this type of question.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. It's just funny. I was just contemplating the pool of the high school arms that we were talking about. I didn't even mention Message or Josh Noth coming back healthy. I mean, and Bishop Letson. I mean, it's like, whoa, it's such a joyous pool of pitching talent. I mean, Broca, one of the more surprisingly pleasant seasons as a whole last year. I mean, what a job he did. I mean, he still had some, he had some rough spots and moments, but he really came into his own. And then he's a guy that, you could see, like, if he keeps on that path, he could, get into contention at some point down the road. He's got an interesting build, interesting delivery, a lot of movement on the off-speed stuff. Can hit it, his heater plays better than you would think. And then you look and you're like, oh, wow, that touched 95, 96. Holy cow. And then, of course, you know how I feel about Rodriguez. So that's, and Melvin's he's a ball clay. He's still so young, and he's got so many, as good of a pitcher he is in terms of just like a raw ability to pitch. He is, high A is his first test, because they're not, knowing how the Brewers work, they're going to let him pitch as he is into this season. And so I'm really curious, is that changeup going to play, and will that heater play the same way off of it in the Midwest League? That's a big jump for that kind of arsenal. But, I mean, Rodriguez certainly showed it could. But, Rodriguez is a different pitcher. He's got different movement, a little more velocity, I think. Just not a lot more, but a little bit more. Bigger frame.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We got a question on the best pitcher fastballs in the org. My personal view on that would be, I think Bishop Letson is up there for me because of the extension and the carry that he gets on it. And from a pretty low release, I would say the same thing for Tyson Harden. It's kind of hard to not throw your lean Rodriguez in terms of just pure fastball ability, because he throws it as hard as anybody, but there's a lot more that will have to go on there. Message is probably up there. I feel like I'm missing. Well, I want to see Joey Broton's, because what I saw on the high school data was absolutely absurd. For me, it probably would be the best fastball in the league or in the org if he shows what he was showing on the movement in high school, or even close to it. But yeah, I guess those are the names that pop into my mind for that. Are there any that you're thinking of?
I'd still throw in Blake Holub. I just really like the shape of his fastball when it's accurate. I also throw in Ryan Burchard's plays because of the ride. It's really impressive. But yeah, man, for that 1 week a year when you see your lean accurate and touching 100, 101 on the gun like multiple times in a random outing, you're like, wait, what? But then, he loses control, and then he falls down to 96, 98 for the rest of the season, and the dream crashes like a car into a brick wall. But yeah, off the top of my head, I think I know we're missing someone. It's inevitable.
Well, I'm sure we are.
So let's just leave it there. We're definitely missing someone. So be easy on us. It's our fifth pod, for crying out loud.
Yeah. And we're hitting the 240 mark on this one. So, Ostentatious asked about relief pitching. He kind of asked about the importance of it. I think we both would agree that the way the Brewers do things and the way they operate, relief pitching is extremely important. In that you can kind of max out your starters by having good relief pitching. So he said, besides that, though, besides Yoho, who do you see as key bullpen arms added to the mix from our system in the coming years? Keener is a guy that I think is going to be a big league reliever to some degree. And then, honestly, a lot of it is like who doesn't start from the group of Letson, Harden, Henderson, Patrick, Episcope, maybe Woodward, those types. Like, the bullpen in reality is often filled from cycling through interesting arms from outside of the organization. You do have the Devin Williams, the Craig Yohos, those types that come through, but most of the time that isn't necessarily how it works out in the bullpen. The Ashbys, those types, but I do think there will be a group of guys who end up in the pen that are just talented arms who don't necessarily have stamina to start or the command to start regularly. But those are the names that pop to the front of my head. I think Holub's another guy that stands out as someone who could. I do think Childers could if he can put it together command-wise because his stuff's really good. But yeah, those are the names that pop to my mind. Anybody you think I'm missing on that one?
Well, honestly, he probably qualifies for the fastball list too. Thinking now, like I told you, we'd forget someone. Tyler Bryant, if he's healthy,
yes.
And when Tyler Bryant's healthy, my goodness, he's a bulldog. We both love Tyler Bryant, and you should too. And I really hope he's healthy. I just really do. I mean, he's just the kind of guy. He's like, man, it's hard to describe, but he's a guy like you see him like he's wearing like glasses with a, with like a sweatband on him. You're just like, God, I want to love this guy. And then you see him pitch, you're like, oh, I love this guy. So yeah, and honestly, also, I think it's worth mentioning because we don't know what version of Mark Manfredi we have, but man, when Mark Manfredi is good, you can dream a little bit on Mark Manfredi because he can hit 97. It's coming across his body like Brent Suter-esque, and boy, and there are moments. There have been more than one moment in his career. Like I think back to when he was a Timber Rattler, like they were putting him in setup roles but his fall from grace, although last season he reclaimed a bunch of his status, was that, that elusive control again. And so I still take Manfredi pretty seriously, but with the addendum that it has to be more consistent. But yeah, beyond that, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think you hit him.
SF70 asked, and I think I'll answer for both of us on this. He says, I'm interested in the young pitching throughout the system. Do you agree with me that the pitching is ready to explode? I think we've kind of been answering that throughout all of these. I think we both say yes. Like there is a ton of talent. Guys are there are going to be some that flame out or get hurt and it doesn't work out. But from all this talent, there's going to be a big rise in a bunch of pitchers on lists over the next couple of years because there is just too much arm talent in too good of an organization for development for it to not work out that way. We got a very long question from Snoogans 8056. It's a really good question. We'll try and get to as much of it as we can here, but he talked about Baseball America had a Stuff Plus article, and that's where we got like the Mendoza information at the beginning of the podcast, where the Brewers placed in the middle/bottom of most of the top metrics. He said what jumps out is that we were first in almost all spin-related metrics, along with horizontal movement. Where we fall off is the velocity, which seems to be the biggest influence on the actual Stuff Plus number, which most of the time it plays a very big role in it for sure. In roughly the same week, they came out with an article on production from players young for the league. We are blowing teams out of the water here. And that's with their specification of young player being a 26-year-old in AAA. If you narrowed that age for being young down even more, I imagine the spread between us and the rest of minor league baseball would be shocking. He says, I'm just an idiot fan, but putting 2 and 2 together, this feels like a canary in the coal mine. Our arms are the youngest by far in the league, pitch the most innings, have crazy ball manipulation data, and have the results already going for them. Everything seems to be setting up for something huge if the velocities come around. Not sure if I gave you an actual question here, Spencer, but I guess it would be, are you taking away the same things from this data? Just how much are you buying in on what we are up to? And then he even came back after another article about college programs not wanting high school pitching, rushing to add velo, all of that. And said that seems to line up with the Brewers' new philosophy too. And he asked, do you think Chris Livonis would be throwing 100 for us this offseason? He says he doesn't. So Chris Livonis, the Brewers pick who did not sign, has been touching 100 with just a disgusting shape on his fastball. The one that got away from me easily. If he was in the Brewers system, man, he'd be so far up my list, it'd be crazy right now. But I do think it's a fair question as to whether he'd actually be touching triple digits for the Brewers. And my guess is that no, I don't think he would be. Do I think he was already coming in with a much different baseline than most young players are for velo? Yes. So the fact that the Brewers wouldn't have to push to put on a bunch of velo for him to get up to that number. But they are careful with that. We've talked about it throughout the other episodes. They don't like to do it until they're basically out of their teenage years before they even focus on velocity. So I do think it lines up well with the Brewers, where instead of them being in college where they're kind of being pushed to add velo and perform immediately because of it, and instead they're in the Brewers system where they're like, we want to take the process through the minor leagues here and really work on let's work on your command. Let's work on, different shapes with your pitches, but we're not going to force the velo until you're more mature and old enough to do it. I do think that's very valuable for the Brewers. And that's why when you brought up the fact that they might take away the ability to draft high schoolers, like, I don't even think that'd be a good thing for the players. I think you'd be hurting players in that regard because they wouldn't get that patience at the college level. They don't get that patience at the college level that they would get in pro ball at least from the smart organizations like the Brewers. But in terms of the overall question on Stuff Plus versus the age, yes, I do think with the Brewers having these spin traits, good movement from side to side, the vertical movement also often ties, especially on fastballs, with velocity. So not to a huge degree, but it can be influenced a little bit by it. I do think this is something where the Brewers are in a really, really good spot. I'm definitely not concerned by what we see in the Stuff Plus numbers overall for the organization. They are willing to throw out teenagers who throw 87 to 88, 89 miles per hour, but have really good movement qualities. And they know that velo is, at least for some of them, going to come around at some point, and then you're going to have the best of both worlds because you're going to have the command, you're going to have developed the velo at a reasonable, smart pace, and then all of it kind of comes together as like a 21, 22-year-old instead of trying to force a 19-year-old into being that guy. Like that does happen at the college level. So yes, I do think this is what you are saying in your question. I do think that's very accurate. I think that's absolutely a lot of what is happening here. And I think it makes a lot of sense that, going to college can change the path of development. And sometimes that's a really good thing. Chris Livonis turned down insane money from the Brewers for a high schooler to not sign. The current stuff he's showing at Wake Forest, if he can stay healthy, he's going to make more than he got offered by the Brewers. And that was about $3 million in a signing bonus that he was offered. And he turned that down as a high schooler. So his bet on himself is looking like it'll actually pay off, which frankly, good for him. I couldn't believe that he was doing that when I heard the number that he was offered, but it seems like it's going to pay off. And clearly the dude believed in himself and believed in what he could do. And in the Wake Forest pitching coaches, because they're very good at their job too. But yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. I think this is something that in a year or two, when they redo this, the Brewers are still going to be pretty young for most levels, and they're also going to be jumping up on these Stuff Plus leaderboards because a lot of guys are going to add the velo that they're not currently showing. So, yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think you pretty much nailed it within the question. But Joseph, what did you, just based on hearing that and kind of hearing the question, and I think you at one point had read those Baseball America articles as well. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that you're both on the right path, and I think that if we extrapolate out what their stated plan was with Manuel Rodriguez, we can essentially deduce that they likely have a philosophy around in your age 21 season, as you're approaching the age of 21. Um, that is when they feel comfortable with the younger arms to explicitly work on velo related endeavors. And, Jesus Broca, we saw a little bit of jump in velo. Well, he's 22. Manuel will
Yep.
turn 21 in August, I think. I think it's an August birthday. So this is his first off season working on velo. And that's why, where I said Melvin Hernandez is on a different arc. Well, he's younger. And so he's only 19. And so he's not going to be working on velo for another offseason at least. And so I think that's going to be a similar thing for like the Dubanowitz or Hayden Robinson or Noth, who is already throwing, pretty decent stuff. Conversely, if you have a guy like Bryce Message, whose calling card is the velocity, well, they're not going to change it because he's bringing it in. It's the same with Miz and Woodward were throwing like 95, 96 when he came in. Different situation there, obviously. But yeah, so if you have the velo and you bring it in, they're not going to tweak it. But if you don't, they're not going to rush it. That's pretty clear. And that's a very health conscious methodology. You don't want to, there's a lot of moving parts when you're pitching a baseball. So,
Yep. Agreed. I think we can hit our last question here, and it's a good wrap up. It'll lead us right into the next season. But SF70 asks, of the 4 full season affiliates, which one are you most excited to watch in the early going next season? Obviously, we don't know exactly what the rosters will be, but I think we have a pretty good idea of where the main players are going to wind up. So, Joseph, first glance, based off of what we know right now, who are you most excited to watch next?
That's an absolutely easy answer for me, Biloxi.
Right out the bat.
Yeah, Biloxi, period. You got Bishop Letson, you got Mate, you got Pratt. I mean, hopefully Adam Shevsky's there. I mean, you get to see Tyson Harden in the second year of his renaissance. Is Tyler Bryant healthy? I mean, man, woo, baby. Is Matt Wood AA? Is that really, Blake Burke? I mean, Wilkin, Fisher. That is going to be stacked. And, I just have to say this again. Any chance you get to watch Jesus Mate play baseball, you have to take that chance. This does not come around
often. Yep. Absolutely with you. It's very easily Biloxi for me as well. There's just going to be so much talent filtering through there all season.
Yeah.
Pretty good chance it's just going to be the one I'm most locked in on all year anyway. But I'll always throw out Carolina because I think the most fun I have is watching guys for the first time who I haven't seen at all. So for me, it's always like you get that chance to watch Carolina and you get to see guys who have just come up from the complex league and you've seen some footage at times, you've seen some swings, but now you get to watch them play all game and watch them play, see what they can do just on the whole and how they play the game. That's always very fun for me, but there's zero chance anybody is surpassing Biloxi at the start of the year with Jesus Mate and the group of talent that's going to be surrounding him.
Yeah, and shout out Carolina. They haven't pitched an inning in Wilson yet. My mezcleros, pesqueros. Oh, man.
Yeah. So. That'll also be, it'll be fun. We'll get to see a new stadium. I'm very interested in seeing how the broadcast looks at a new stadium. I'm going to see where the camera is, and I'm hoping for a real good setup. Brewers, you got to do us right here. Let's get a really good camera setup. That's all I'm asking for.
I'm
excited for all of that.
So. Back to Biloxi, though, I am very curious, given that it is Biloxi, what camera issue will we have to start 2026? Will it be a smudgy lens? Will it be at a weird angle? Will it be hyper zoomed? I don't know. It's a mystery.
Yep. Hopefully it's not from behind the plate this time. That's all I care about. I can live with anything else. Just can't do with the above home plate footage. That one was tough. But yeah, no, I'm just very excited to get going with all baseball stuff. And like I said, we'll have spring training starting up soon here. Jack and I will be going back to our once a week podcast instead of every other. But yeah, this has been obviously a ton of fun. I hope for both of us. I think we both showed that we were having a lot of fun with this. So Joseph, thanks for doing it. And obviously pretty decent chance this will be the last time we're doing it because you're just because of the busyness and everything else. So it's been a really fun 2 years doing it. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Great blast. And it's always such a great way to finalize all of the innings we both watched, but hey, follow Spencer. I'm sure you'll see his Twitter drops. I might actually get a Twitter account I actually post in now that I have to have businesses going. It won't be about baseball, however. But I will chime in on some of your tweets.
Well, that would be wonderful. I would look forward to that. Yes, we will for sure, especially once my season gets done with. I try and get video up during April, but man, that is a busy month for me. But once we're done in May, yeah, you'll be seeing way too many clips coming from you on Twitter. So, of course, check those out.
I hope Brewer fans
for my Blue Sky people, I will try to remember.
I hope Brewer fans realize how spoiled you are to just go online and go to Spencer's page, and he has like every at-bat of so-and-so, or this is every pitch from Manuel Rodriguez when he touched 96 on the gun. Woo!
If he starts doing that, you will absolutely get that video. It'll be out there right away. But no, that's all we've got. Again, thank you all for listening. I know these are long. Hopefully you enjoy them and maybe have been taking them in bits and pieces as we go. But yeah, this is a lot of fun, and I'll find a way to do it next year. We'll figure out some way to at least get something similar with somebody. But yeah, this has been a great time, and yeah, we will wrap it up here. So thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll be back with Major League content and spring training content in less than a week, probably, from whenever this comes out. So see you all then.